It was only a dream of mine that someday I'd have the opportunity to be part of such an important astronomy mission as this one, the Advanced X-ray Astrophysics Facility. And throughout my life, and in particular in my career in the U.S. military and with NASA, I've been given important jobs and responsibilities, and I now accept this responsibility with all the determination and the motivation and the diligence that I've had and all the other challenges I've faced.
The Chandra telescope was supposed to be released from the space shuttle in April. Now NASA has postponed the launch until May or even later. The circuit boards are in the telescope's command and data unit and are crucial to the mission's success. Once it's deployed, the telescope will move to a very high orbit, too high for the shuttle to make service calls.
We do emergency egress training. As you know, the shuttle has an escape system that will allow us to safely get out in controlled gliding flight if we need to. And I'll introduce the crew here. Jeff Ashby is a captain in the U.S. Navy. Jeff's also a graduate of the Top Gun School, the Navy Test Pilot School, and he flew 33 combat missions in Operation Desert Storm, and he flew his first flight on Columbia. Katie Coleman, MS-1, was responsible for the deploy of Chandra. She's a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and she flew one mission prior to this. It was a 17-day microgravity flight. Steve Hawley's our astronomer on the flight. Steve previously, actually he flew his fifth flight with us, and his previous flights include the Hubble Space Telescope deploy and the second repair mission. Michel Tonini comes to us from CNES, which is the French space agency. He flew his first flight on the shuttle, but he previously flew a 2-week mission on Mir. We have a beautiful shot here of Chandra in the Columbia's payload bay. This was taken just a few days before launch, and Chandra was the single heaviest payload ever launched on the shuttle.
We conduct our training in a simulator like the one you see now. It's a fixed base in Houston, and we repeated the operation like ascent, orbit, or entry and landing. The simulator is very similar to the one we use, I mean, like Columbia, and we spend about 2 or 3 times between 4 hours and 10 hours each week. In case something went wrong, we had also to perform a spacewalk, and you see us, Katie Coleman and myself, training at the swimming pool in Johnson Space Center. You see the mock-up of the orbiter with the engine, the booster IUS behind, and the front side with Chandra.
We also have some simulators that very accurately represent the layout of the space shuttle, and this shows Michelle and me on the mid-deck of one of these simulators practicing the installation of a second telescope that we'll have on the mission, and I'll show you later some results we got with that. It's an ultraviolet telescope that we use to observe some solar system objects through the side hatch window. We also, believe it or not, still go to school. We take some classes. This class in particular is some Earth observations training. Every mission, photograph the Earth, areas of interest to scientists, and we prepare in that way to do that job. A very important part of our training is by being aircrew members in our T-38 jet trainers. We get to practice in the jets a lot of the same skills we use in the space shuttle, such as using checklists, talking on the radios, flight planning, and learning to work together as team members.
Eileen and Michelle and I are all career test pilots. We maintain our skills primarily in the T-38. We also have a shuttle training aircraft we fly. We fly formation flights, instrument training, and acrobatic type flights to maintain our skills. The last shot of the T-38 here, you'll see us traveling into the Kennedy Space Center with the shuttle landing facility just below the second aircraft.
Now, is it just a forgotten detail from a tragic moment in U.S. history, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, or is it more fodder for conspiracy theorists? Jonathan Aiken reports.
Among the many questions left unanswered from the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the whereabouts of a bronze casket used to bring his body back to Washington from Dallas. Kennedy was buried in a mahogany coffin. The bronze casket had disappeared until now. Documents released Tuesday by the National Archives reveal it's off the Delaware coast, under 9,000 feet of water, in an abandoned military dump site. The archives show Robert Kennedy, the president's brother, insisted the coffin be disposed of to prevent it from becoming an object of morbid curiosity. Kennedy told General Services Administration Administrator Lawson Knott in February of 1966, "What I would like to have done is take it out to sea." Told there might be a problem destroying what amounted to government property, Kennedy said, "I think it belongs to the family, and we can get rid of it any way we want to." Documents show 2 weeks after that conversation, the coffin, loaded with sandbags and riddled with holes, was dumped from an Air Force C-130. The bronze casket was replaced because it was damaged. Skeptics have offered various theories as to how that damage occurred and why.
Secret Service, as I believe they must have, took the body out and put it into another casket and got it back to Washington in some other way.
The documents are open to interpretation, but suggest expediency, not conspiracy, may have prompted Robert Kennedy to seek the casket's disposal.
The people who believe in conspiracies are as interested in this collection as people who don't believe in the conspiracies. And
the documents do prove one thing. 36 years after John Kennedy was laid to rest, theories about his assassination would not be. Jonathan Aiken for CNN, Washington.
Bugs. They invade our homes. They even star in movies.
Squish them.
But squishing won't stop the greatest bug infestation of all, the one on your TV screen. You know the station logo in the corner of the screen?
Right. That bugs you.
I call them bugs. What do you call them?
Station things.
What do you guys call it?
Pain in the ass.
Whatever you call them, they are multiplying like roaches as viewers surf and networks mark their turf.
You know, sometimes we forget what station we're watching.
To combat that, there are solid bugs and see-through bugs, bugs on top of bugs when one network uses another's footage. From the Romance Channel Heart to the Outdoor Life Leaf, from hokey to high-tech. At the Sci-Fi Channel, they've opted for animation.
That's a bug. It's sort of like an atomic thing. It sort of swirls around.
At MTV, the cube floats.
I think the response we want to get from our audience, if they were to look at our bug, say, hey, MTV's bug is really cool.
To bug or not to bug, the Discovery Channel is one of the few that doesn't leave its bug up continually so as not to muck up what executives call the visually arresting photography.
Forget the bug. I mean, give it a rest.
I like logos. I mean, I like that.
We're a logo nation.
Many say CNN pioneered the bug on American TV back in the early 80s. The logo was small and yellow back then. Now it's big and red, while Bernie Shaw's head has more gray. Our search for the bug's roots led us to CNN director Chris Valente.
Dissolve, go.
His control room colleagues tell him,
I'm the guy that came up with the phrase. That's what it is, it's a bug.
Over at ABC, they call it the meatball, to the annoyance of executives who find the term undignified. When bugs really started breeding, an Associated Press TV critic compared them to bugs on the windshield obscuring the view. At the Arizona Republic, they published logo eliminators to clip out and tape over the bug. Saturday Night Live had a field day.
Welcome to News Force. Thanks for having us. Now here's more stuff to look at.
Now it's not a question of if, but where.
Most people put them in a corner. I wouldn't put it in the middle, probably.
On its April Fool's episode, the Drew Carey Show featured an elusive bug that had to be put in its place. Lower right, lower left, the bugs have the upper hand. Ginny Mo, CNN, New York.
And I'm Rosemary Church at the CNN Centre. Stay with CNN for updates on the situation in Yugoslavia and all the latest international news. We'll have another live report in 30 minutes.
DeForest Kelley ist tot. Der Schauspieler starb im Alter von 79 Jahren in Los Angeles. Bekannt wurde er als Dr. McCoy alias Pille in der Serie Raumschiff Enterprise. Neben Captain Kirk und dem ersten Offizier Spock war McCoy eine der Hauptfiguren der Kultserie. Seine letzten Jahre verbrachte er in einem Altersheim für Schauspieler.
Er war wohl der beliebteste Arzt des Weltraumzeitalters. Der Schauspieler DeForest Kelley, besser bekannt als Dr. McCoy vom Raumschiff Enterprise. Er starb im Alter von 79 Jahren. 1966 begann er, sich um die Gesundheit seiner Crew zu kümmern. Nach dem unglaublichen Erfolg der Fernsehserie folgten 6 Enterprise-Kinofilme mit Chefarzt Pille. In den unendlichen Weiten des Weltraums behandelte er dabei auch sehr ungewöhnliche Patienten.
Over Yugoslavia are returning home to Louisiana's Barksdale Air Force Base. These are live pictures you're seeing. The bombers had been stationed in England for the past 5 months. The Pentagon has said that almost 400 U.S. aircraft will soon be returning to normal duty. Worldview will be right back.
The next Space Shuttle launch from the Kennedy Space Center is Columbia, scheduled tentatively for Tuesday, July 20th at 12:36 a.m. at the opening of a 46-minute launch window. This is shuttle mission STS-93 to deploy the Chandra X-ray Observatory. Launch will be from Pad 39B, and 5 astronauts will be aboard. This is planned to be a 5-day mission with landing on July 24th at 11:31 p.m. The next unmanned launch from Cape Canaveral is the Global Star commercial communications satellite on a Delta II rocket. Launch will be from Complex 17 on July 8th at the opening of a launch window, which extends from 5:17 a.m. to 8:21 a.m. In other Space Shuttle launch activity, Endeavour is scheduled for launch on the STS-93 shuttle radar topography mission on September 16th at 8:47 a.m. This is an 11-day mission with landing on September 27th at 12:52 p.m. Space Shuttle Discovery is planned for launch on October 14th at 5:42 a.m. at the opening of a 42-minute launch window. This is the STS-103 mission, a flight to service the Hubble Space Telescope. This will be a 9-day flight with landing to occur on October 23rd at 3:09 a.m. The final Space Shuttle launch of 1999 is Atlantis on the STS-101 mission, the 3rd International Space Station construction flight. Launch is scheduled for December 2nd. Landing will occur on December 13th. The launch and landing times have not yet been announced.
Thank you for calling.
And coming up on Worldview, pulling a U.S. space capsule off the ocean floor.
Off the coast of Florida, an effort to recover a sunken spacecraft. The expedition financed by the Discovery Channel. CNN's John Zarella reports.
38 years ago, July 21st, 1961, astronaut Gus Grissom is rescued from the waters of the Atlantic Ocean.
After 4 anxious minutes, Grissom struggled into the horse collar and was lifted clear of the water.
The trouble started after splashdown. The hatch blew open prematurely, and the spacecraft filled with water. The Mercury capsule couldn't be saved. These were the last pictures of the Liberty Bell for nearly 4 decades.
I mean, I was bouncing off the walls when we found it, to be honest with you.
2 months ago, Kurt Newport led an expedition that found that 9-foot-long lost piece of U.S. space history. Liberty Bell is resting on a sandy bottom in 15,000-foot deep waters, waters some 3,000 feet deeper than the Titanic's North Sea graveyard. Now, Newport and his team are heading back to the site in hopes of recovering the capsule. In most recovery efforts, Newport says, search teams are just going after wreckage. That's not the case with the Liberty Bell.
What makes this different is like it's an intact artifact, and we want to recover it, not do any damage to it. So from that standpoint, it makes it more difficult.
There is hope that once the capsule is recovered, engineers may be able to figure out why the hatch suddenly blew. Grissom, who died in 1967 in the tragic Apollo 1 fire, maintained to his death that he had done nothing to trigger the mishap.
It certainly didn't affect his career within the space program. He was in line before he was killed in the Apollo 1 accident to be the commander of the first lunar landing mission.
But just recovering the capsule may not be enough. Experts say the clues would likely be found in the hatch, which hasn't been located. The expedition to recover Liberty Bell is expected to take 12 days. If he has time, Newport says, he'll look for the hatch. NASA has given the rights to the capsule to a museum called the Kansas Cosmosphere. Once recovered, Liberty Bell will be taken there, restored, and ultimately put on display. Some 40 years after it was last seen sinking to the bottom. John Zarella, CNN, Tampa, Florida.
For Worldview, I'm Bernard Shaw.
And I'm Judy Woodruff. The Moneyline News Hour next.
A decade ago, U.S. planes patrolling out of Iceland routinely encountered Soviet bombers on exercises over the Norwegian Sea. But Russia's economic woes effectively grounded such expensive displays of military force. That is, until last week. This Air Force photograph shows a U.S. F-15 intercepting one of two Russian Tu-95 Bear bombers as they flew around Iceland last Friday. In theory, close enough to strike the United States with air-launched cruise missiles. The Pentagon downplayed the significance of the unexpected encounter, saying the aging propeller-driven bombers were not a military threat and were simply part of a larger military exercise that had been previously announced.
I'm sure it does have, they have some multiple purposes, perhaps for domestic purposes, international purposes. They want to be seen as remaining a force that one has to deal with. We deal with them.
Russia claims an impressive array of its military took part in the exercise, West 99. 50,000 troops, as well as ships and submarines from 3 Navy fleets. Pentagon officials say they think those numbers are somewhat inflated and theorize Russia may simply want to flex its military muscle to send a message to NATO it's still a force to be reckoned with. The military moves come as Russia is attempting to renegotiate a deal in Kosovo to give its peacekeepers more authority over Serb areas.
There was some creative reinterpretation of the Helsinki Agreement, which we discussed, and I believe most of that's off the table at this point.
The Russian bombers didn't violate any sovereign airspace, and while publicly the Pentagon is willing to take Russia at its word, privately it's increasingly wary of its supposed ally because of its broken promise in deploying troops to Kosovo. Jamie McIntyre, CNN, The Pentagon.
Former U.S. astronaut Pete Conrad has died after a motorcycle accident in Southern California. He was riding with friends Thursday when he apparently lost control of his motorcycle. CNN's Miles O'Brien remembers a man who never lost his zest for space travel.
To be returned
Captain Charles Conrad, Jr. We all knew him as Pete. A short man, he took a big step into the history books in November 1969, becoming the third person to walk on the moon.
I think I see my crater.
He commanded Apollo 12 along with Alan Bean, executing a precision landing on the moon's ocean of storms.
And that may have been a small one for Neil, but that's a long one for me.
Conrad graduated from Princeton University, became a naval aviator, and joined the astronaut corps in 1962.
Gordon Cooper and Charles Conrad demonstrated that an 8-day lunar mission is feasible. They spent
3 years later, as pilot of Gemini 5, he set an orbital endurance record. He'd set another endurance record in 1973 on the first Skylab mission, 1,179 hours and 38 minutes in space. After leaving NASA, he worked for aerospace giant McDonnell Douglas, and later his own ventures aimed at commercializing space.
Pete was developing new commercial ways to open the space frontier. He founded a company called United Space Lines, and he had just won a contract to operate commercially the Triana spacecraft. He had invented a new rocket that was going to cut the cost and improve the reliability of going to space. And there was Pete, always pushing the boundaries, always coming into my office with a new idea. And at 69, he had the spirit of a 13-year-old.
And after fellow astronaut John Glenn made his return to orbit at the age of 77, Conrad said he was looking forward to turning 77 himself and getting his chance to return to space. He said, if NASA doesn't send me back, I'll just have to do it myself.
I think the way I look at it is I've never worked in my life. I've always enjoyed what I was doing and had fun doing it. And so that was what I wanted to wind up doing, and I was very happy to do it.
Pete Conrad was 69. Miles O'Brien, CNN.
Vor der Nordostküste der USA. Helfer suchen fieberhaft nach Wrackteilen. John F. Kennedy Jr., einziger Sohn des ermordeten US-Präsidenten, soll hier mit seinem Privatflugzeug abgestürzt sein. Erste Gepäckstücke und Trümmer wurden bereits gefunden. Aber stammen sie wirklich von Kennedys Flugzeug? Zum neuesten Stand mehr später in der Sendung. Als liege wirklich ein Fluch auf der Familie Kennedy. John F., der Präsident, erschossen. Ebenso sein Bruder Robert, als er Präsident werden wollte. Bruder Edward, der Senator, verunglückt betrunken mit dem Auto. Seine Begleiterin kommt dabei ums Leben. Ein Enkel Kennedy stirbt an einer Überdosis Drogen, ein anderer bei einem Skiunfall. Tragik und Glanz lagen bei den Kennedys stets dicht beisammen. Amerika war und ist fasziniert von beiden Seiten der wohl berühmtesten Familie. Jetzt hat das Schicksal wieder zugeschlagen. So wie es jetzt aussieht, ist Präsident Kennedys Sohn John Jr. bei einem Flugzeugabsturz ums Leben gekommen. Michael Schmitz aus Washington mit den letzten Einzelheiten.
Fieberhaft geht die Suche weiter. 20 Flugzeuge sind an der Ostküste unterwegs, vor allem über der Insel Martha's Vineyard. Vor kurzem berichtete die US-Küstenwache, sie habe am Strand Flugzeugtrümmer geortet und einiges Gepäck. Eine Tasche soll einem der Passagiere von Kennedys Maschine gehören. Mit seiner Piper Saratoga startete John F. Jr. gestern Abend vom Essex Airport in New Jersey. An Bord auch seine Frau und deren Schwester. Sie wollten zur Hochzeit von Rory Kennedy, einer Cousine, fliegen und auf der Insel Martha's Vineyard zwischenlanden. Als die Maschine nicht ankam, alarmierte Kennedys Familie die Flugsicherheit. Die schaltete das Pentagon ein. Das US-Verteidigungsministerium koordiniert die Suche. Ganz Amerika nimmt Anteil, hofft, dass John F. Kennedy Jr. und seine Frau doch noch leben. Den Sohn des ermordeten Präsidenten John F. Kennedy begleitet die Nation auf allen Stationen seines Lebens. Neugierig, mit Sympathie und immer auch mit Wehmut. Alle kennen diese Bilder, Vater und Sohn, in kurzen Jahren des Glücks. Staatsbegräbnis des Vaters 1963. Die Szene rührt noch immer viele zu Tränen. Der kleine John salutiert, als der Sarg vorüberzieht, am 25. November, seinem 3. Geburtstag. Die Familiengeschichte der Kennedys ist voller Tragik. Jackie, die Mutter, meinte, ihre wirkliche Leistung sei es gewesen, unter dramatischen Lebensumständen ihre Kinder seelisch gesund großgezogen zu haben. Seine Frau Caroline Bissett hat er vor 3 Jahren geheiratet, für die Öffentlichkeit überraschend, im kleinen Kreis der Familie und enger Freunde, ohne großen Trubel, vor allem ohne Presse. Die folgt den Kennedys in Amerika, wo sie kann. Privates Leben müssen sie stets erkämpfen, oft durch Flucht vor den Kameras. Journale beschreiben John F. Jr. als Frauenschwarm, als Mann mit dem größten Sexappeal. Ladies and gentlemen, meet George. Er strebte nie, wie viele andere Kennedys, nach politischen Posten. Er gründete das Magazin George, das den Lesern Menschen zeigen will, hinter Fassaden der Politik.
Ich bin jetzt mit unserem Amerika-Korrespondenten Michael Schmitz verbunden. Wie ist denn der neueste Stand? Gibt es inzwischen eine Bestätigung für den Flugzeugabsturz?
Schönen guten Abend. Nein, eine Bestätigung gibt es nicht. Keiner will die Hoffnung ganz aufgeben, besonders die Küstenwache, die nach wie vor intensiv sucht, hält sich mit Kommentaren zurück. Aber tatsächlich sinkt doch die Hoffnung, weil alle Anzeichen auf ein tragisches Unglück hindeuten. Bewohner der Insel Martha's Vineyard haben Gepäckstücke aus dem Wasser gefischt. Auf einem schwarzen Koffer war auch eine Visitenkarte von Lauren Bissett. Das ist die Schwägerin von John F. Kennedy Jr. Also vermutlich ist die Maschine abgestürzt beim Anflug auf die Insel. Es wird mittlerweile darauf hingewiesen, dass Kennedy kein erfahrener Pilot gewesen ist. Erst vor einem Jahr hat er die Lizenz erworben. Und seit über 20 Stunden werden die Passagiere vermisst. Also selbst wenn sie den unmittelbaren Absturz überlebt haben sollten, sind die Chancen sehr gering, dass sie danach im Wasser überlebt haben.
One cannot help but reflect that the Kennedy family has given more to our country than any family should have to do. But our country is so much better because of the gifts that they have given. Our prayers are with the entire family this day.
US President Bill Clinton telephoned several members of the Kennedy family on Saturday night from his presidential retreat outside Washington. He spoke with Senator Edward Kennedy and Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg, John Jr.'s sister. As CNN's David Ensor reports, President Clinton and his wife have a warm friendship with the Kennedy family.
As a teenager, Bill Clinton got a chance to meet John Kennedy Jr.'s father, shaking the president's hand during a Rose Garden event. He's always seen John Kennedy as a role model. Both the Clintons admire the way the Kennedys handled themselves at the White House.
I, William Jefferson Clinton.
And when Mr. Clinton was elected president, the new First Lady reached out to Jackie Kennedy Onassis for advice.
She was a great support to me personally when I started talking with her in the summer of 1992 about the challenges and opportunities of being in this position and how she had managed so well to carve out the space and privacy that children need to grow into what they have a right to become.
Through their years in the White House, the Clintons have stayed in frequent touch with the Kennedy family. They sailed with family members off Martha's Vineyard a number of times. And the president attended, along with John Kennedy Jr. and other family members, a 1993 rededication of the Kennedy Presidential Library, where he spoke about the former president's legacy.
He inspired millions of us to take a very personal responsibility for moving our country forward and for advancing the cause of freedom throughout the world.
When Jackie Kennedy Onassis died, the president comforted John Kennedy Jr. and his sister at her burial next to their father at Arlington National Cemetery. He spoke of their mother's poise and inner strength.
God gave her very great gifts and imposed upon her great burdens. She bore them all with dignity and grace and uncommon common sense. In the end, she cared most about being a good mother to her children, and the lives of Caroline and John leave no doubt that she was that and more.
And so the Clintons feel a personal stake in the fate of John F. Kennedy Jr. and his family. A White House statement says simply, our prayers and thoughts are with the families of those on board. David Ensor, CNN, the White House.
Star communication satellites were launched into orbit at Cape Canaveral, Florida, Saturday. The Boeing Delta II rocket roared skywards just before dawn. High winds delayed the launch by 2 days. The satellites are for a wireless telephone service scheduled to begin in autumn.
The next shuttle flight, planned for July 20th, will deploy a huge X-ray telescope that could shed light on the history of the universe. And the mission will make some history of its own. It's the first to be commanded by a woman. Miles O'Brien has more.
For Air Force Colonel Eileen Collins, it's high time. The first woman to command a NASA space mission is ready to lead her crew into orbit.
I don't really think about whether I'm comfortable in this role or not. What I think about when I go to work every day is what needs to be done today to make this mission work.
Eileen Collins may not think about it because she's used to being a pioneer. Among the first group of women to fly for the Air Force, she signed on with NASA in 1990, becoming the first woman pilot of a shuttle 5 years later.
So it's really just been a lot of luck, I think, and a lot of good timing that I've made it here today.
Of course, women crew members aboard the shuttle are old news. Sally Ride broke that barrier back in 1983. And 26 U.S. women followed her into space. But Eileen Collins is the first woman to find herself at the flight controls of a space shuttle, first as a pilot and now as commander. And while it's a precedent for the U.S. space program, the world record in this category was broken by the Russians some 36 years ago. When parachutist Valentina Tereshkova flew alone into orbit in 1963, she was technically a mission commander. Brave as the stunt was, space historians say ground controllers commanded and controlled every aspect of that flight.
There's no comparison at all between the first woman in orbit, Valentina Tereshkova, who was just a passenger, who had no prior training, who was, I think, an ace parachutist, but that's about all.
Collins commands a crew of 4 on a complex 5-day mission to deploy a $2.8 billion X-ray telescope. Collins' personal life is grounded with a husband and 3-year-old daughter.
I have a high energy level. That's how I get through these tremendously long days, and then I go home and I have, more long days at home waiting for me. But, I have a high energy level and I really love what I'm doing.
There are only 2 other women pilots in NASA's astronaut corps, and not a single female flyer in the most recent class of candidates. Pilots like Eileen Collins are hard to come by indeed. For Science and Technology Week, I'm Miles O'Brien. You had to get up early if you were going to be the first to land on the moon. The wake-up call came at 4:15 on the morning of Wednesday, July 16th, 1969. One crew, three very different personalities. Neil Armstrong.
A veteran test pilot, kind of taciturn personality, not a public personality then or now.
Buzz Aldrin.
Very intense, very highly strung, very intelligent man.
And Michael Collins.
The son of military parents, a thoughtful guy, a very elegant and eloquent writer.
For precisely 25 minutes, they ate their breakfast: steak, eggs, toast, juice, and coffee. Collins called the atmosphere studied casualness. Then it was time to suit up. Once locked inside, they were in a cocoon. In a metal suitcase, they carried their air supply. They walked to the crew transfer van, seeing a group of NASA workers and photographers, but hearing only the sound of their breathing. They drove slowly to Launch Pad 39A, about 8 miles and 20 minutes away. Their launch window would open at 9:32 and close 14 minutes later. The timing was precise, so 4 days later they would arrive at the moon's Sea of Tranquility with the sun behind the lunar module and low on the horizon for optimal visibility.
And all is still go as we monitor.
20,000 VIPs, 3,500 members of the media, 1 million people along the Florida coast, and millions more watching at home, all focused on this amazing spectacle.
Well, it was hot. It was a hot summer morning at Kennedy Space Center. You had the sense that you were kind of the nerve center of the world.
In the Launch Control Center, the father of the Saturn V, Wernher von Braun, looked on as Launch Director Rocco Petrone polled his troops. Go, came the reply from every post and from the crew.
There were no problems. The Saturn V was a very, very good piece of machinery. It was big, it was over-designed, it was very robust in its technical characteristics.
At T-minus 12 seconds, the ignition sequence began. Flames snorted out of the quintet of mammoth F-1 engines. When the countdown clock struck 0, huge hold-down clamps retracted, and the 6.5 million pound rocket was set free.
The countdown went without a hitch or a delay, and they went off at 9:32 in the morning, exactly on time as planned. So it was almost like clockwork.
Despite a nudge that was 7.75 million pounds strong, Saturn seemed reluctant to leave. It took 15 seconds just to clear the tower. The crew reported later it seemed even longer than that. But they were on their way. Their destination was destiny. Miles O'Brien, CNN.
For an in-depth look at the Apollo 11 mission and that one giant leap for mankind, log on to our website at cnn.com/Apollo.
Neil Armstrong, the all-American astronaut at 68, is apparently doing fine. In a rare meeting with the media, the J.D. Salinger of the space race seemed humble, humorous, and forthright, his reputation as a recluse notwithstanding.
Wish you could have traded that opportunity to be the first to land on the moon for the opportunity to lead a life with fewer public demands.
Never. He is the right stuff personified, and yet one reporter asked why his heart was racing a bit as the lunar surface rose to meet him.
If I were down at 120, I'd be worried about whether I was really interested in figuring out.
Of interest to historians and journalists for years, when did he dream up his eloquent line?
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And didn't he mean for a man? Apparently so.
The A was intended, I thought I said, I can't hear it when I listen on the radio reception here on Earth, so I'll be happy if you just put it in parentheses.
He is a man who takes his duty seriously. Most test pilots do. So did he have any fun while he was on the moon?
I watched Buzz out there trying different kinds of locomotion methods on the surface, which incidentally was his responsibility. He was supposed to do that, but I suspected he was having more fun than I was, because I was hauling rocks at the time.
He was joined by his lunar module pilot Buzz Aldrin, fellow moonwalker Gene Cernan, and Apollo astronaut Walter Cunningham. Would they go back?
I don't know what his answer is, but he's going to have to run fast to the pad.
We're younger, it may be tougher.
Yeah, I left a few things up there.
A little laughter, a lot of ribbing, the competitive juices flowing. At this news conference about the old times, it was just like old times. Miles O'Brien, CNN, at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
Now, as long as eagles fly, the accomplishment of Apollo should and will be remembered and built upon.
A symbolic moment. Buzz Aldrin, the second human to walk on the moon, stands with an eagle perched on his arm. This poignant event was part of ceremonies at the Kennedy Space Center, marking the 30th anniversary of Apollo 11's historic mission. About 1,000 people endured the melting Florida heat for a chance to see and hear anecdotal stories from the men who went to the moon.
People have asked me, did you dream about going to the moon when you were a kid? Well, if I'd have gone out in the backyard with my mama when I was 12 years old and said, Mama, one day I'm going to walk on the moon, Mama would have dropped a net on me and sent me to the psychiatric hospital.
Astronaut Gene Cernan talked about getting a quick lesson in fleeting fame from his daughter.
She says, Daddy, now that you've been to the moon and back, when are you going to take me camping like you promised?
Juan and Maria Couteau drove up for the day from South Florida. It was a chance for their children to be a part of their parents' history.
I wanted the children to see by themselves who they were and to realize that there are no limits in life.
To honor the achievement of Man on the Moon, the U.S. Postal Service took the opportunity to unveil a commemorative stamp. The stamp, a single footprint on the surface, will be released in September. Even with songs, they celebrated the events of 30 years ago when the crew of Apollo 11 was on its way to a rendezvous with history.
Other reaction came from Florida, where Apollo astronauts have gathered at Kennedy Space Center for the 30th anniversary of the Apollo moon landing, a mission started by President John Kennedy.
On this particular day, our hearts go out to that family that has started so much, achieved so much, suffered and sacrificed so much, and now has even further uncertainty.
People in the entertainment community reacted with sadness and concern as the search for the plane and its passengers continued throughout the day Saturday.
I'm saddened by it for them and for the world. I'm particularly saddened for his wife and her sister, and I was thinking earlier today of the parents of those two young ladies.
Jim Hill, CNN, Los Angeles.
I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
Der Mord in Dallas, das Attentat auf Robert Kennedy, Unglücke und Unfälle trafen den Kennedy-Clan wie keinen anderen, jeweils unter großer öffentlicher Anteilnahme. Ein Fluch liegt über der Familie, glauben viele Amerikaner. Es ist eine Tragödie. Die Kennedy-Familie ist verflucht und gesegnet zur gleichen Zeit, beispielhaft fürs Leben im Allgemeinen und für Amerika im Besonderen. In dieser Familie gibt es offensichtlich einen Hang zur Leichtsinnigkeit. Es ist dieser Leichtsinn, dieses cowboyhafte Benehmen, was auch wieder typisch amerikanisch ist. Als amerikanische Königsfamilie liefern sie ein perfektes Beispiel. Die Medien begleiten die neue Tragödie im Hause Kennedy mit Sondersendungen fast rund um die Uhr und Extraausgaben. Amerika trauert. Dan Rather, ein journalistischer Profi, seit Jahrzehnten im Nachrichtengeschäft, rang um seine Fassung, als er sich von den Zuschauern und zugleich von John F. Kennedy verabschiedete. Dan Rather: Die Nachricht, die uns heute erreichte, eine solche Nachricht fürchten wir. Einem Mitglied unserer Familie ist etwas zugestoßen. John F. Kennedy wurde zum Mitglied unserer Familie an einem dunklen Novembertag 1963. Ein Kind, jung und tapfer, hat unser Herz gefangen.
If you found it difficult to turn away from continuing coverage of the disappearance of John F. Kennedy Jr. and his wife and sister-in-law, you are hardly alone.
CNN's Bruce Morton has been watching the story that is gripping the nation's attention this weekend. He has some thoughts on its place in history.
A plane believed to be carrying John F. Kennedy Jr. has gone missing.
I looked up Saturday afternoon. CNN had been on the air with the John Kennedy story all day. Fair enough, it's an all-news network. But checking the monitors on the newsroom wall, I realized everybody else was on the air, too. There were Brokaw and Jennings and Rather, all on the air, had been for hours. When President Kennedy died, I was overseas, and we were shipping film back of how the British were mourning the assassinated American president.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
The broadcast network stayed on for days and helped knit the country back together. It was a very big story, a president murdered.
Lights on. Forward.
When Apollo 11 landed on the moon 30 years ago this coming Tuesday, the network I then worked for stayed on the air the whole time Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were on the moon, 20-some hours. It was a very big story, a man walking around on a place that wasn't Earth. But this time, John Kennedy is a celebrity, of course, is rich and famous, is the publisher of a much-talked-about magazine, but he is not a president nor a head of state. So what is it that generated so much coverage? The parallel may not be President Kennedy nor Apollo, but Princess Diana, a celebrity who had somehow taken an extraordinary place in the hearts of everyday British people. A personal princess, one man described her to me, meaning that he felt as if he knew her, even though, of course, they'd never met. In John Kennedy's case, I think it's not so much one person as the family, which has taken an extraordinary place in Americans' hearts. Whether it's the glamour of Camelot as the Kennedy administration is remembered, or the sadness of all the things that have gone wrong for the Kennedys since, the murdered president, his murdered brother, and so on. Somehow, the Kennedys mean something to Americans, linked to success, or sadness, or whatever. They are in our hearts and souls to stay. Coverage will continue. I'm Bruce Morton.
Wants to say a few words about this very sad matter and get that not exactly out of the way, but get it said before he goes on to the dinner, which he and others want to focus primarily on trying to get the Middle East peace process back on track.
The President, the First Lady, and Chelsea Clinton now walking to the microphones. The President has spent the weekend at Camp David. We expect him now to talk about the search for John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife, and his sister-in-law.
And remember all along as he does this, Gene, the incredible influence the Kennedys have had in his life since he was 16 and shook the hand of a very young president in the Rose Garden, where he now serves.
As the search continues, I want to express our family's support and offer our prayers and those of all Americans for John Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn, her sister Lauren, and to their fine families. I also want to thank the Coast Guard and all those who have worked so hard in this endeavor. For more than 40 years now, the Kennedy family has inspired Americans to public service, strengthened our faith in the future, and moved our nation forward. Through it all, they have suffered much and given more. In recent years, in particular, John Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn have captured our imagination and won our affection. I will always be grateful for their kindnesses to Hillary and Chelsea and me. At this difficult moment, we hope the families of these three fine young people will feel the strength of God, the love of their friends, and the prayers of their fellow citizens. Thank you.
An obviously saddened chief executive as he returns from Camp David, talking about his family's support and the prayers of the nation for the families of John F. Kennedy Jr., Mr. Kennedy's wife Carolyn, and her sister Lauren.
The U.S. Space Agency, NASA, is preparing to make history while celebrating its past. If all goes as planned, the Shuttle Columbia will lift off early Tuesday with the first female commander in U.S. spaceflight history. U.S. Air Force Colonel Eileen Collins has a tough assignment. Columbia will release the powerful new Chandra telescope to detect X-rays and help scientists study elusive black holes and distant quasars. The mission comes as NASA celebrates the anniversary of the Apollo 11 lunar landing 30 years ago Tuesday. And the Russian
Kennedy family speaks of its grief and sadness as the search for John F. Kennedy Jr.'s missing plane goes on. In Florida, getting ready for liftoff on board the Space Shuttle Columbia. It is 6 a.m. here in Berlin on Tuesday, the 20th of July, and this is CNN This Morning. Hello and welcome. I'm Bettina Lüscher. Thank you for joining us live to the Kennedy Space Center as the Space Shuttle Columbia counts down to liftoff. And of course, Karen, we are standing by to see the next shuttle launch. How's the weather down there in Florida? Does it look good for them?
Well, I just checked the weather conditions, and for the most part, there's a scattered layer of clouds. It doesn't look generally too bad. This is a view across Florida. This is the state of Georgia. Out here, nationally, we're talking about the Atlantic, and here's the Gulf Coast region. You see a few of these areas very, very isolated. And the last report we had, the temperature right around the launch site at 26 degrees Celsius, and there was some lightning reported to the southwest in the distance, and it doesn't look like that's going to present a problem, but you can see it is very widely scattered, but nothing, at least at this point, we're now casting at this point, nothing that is materializing and hampering the situation there. Bettina?
So that's good news. Thank you, Karen. Well, in just a little over 20 minutes from now, the Space Shuttle Columbia is set to blast off from Cape Canaveral in Florida, and one of the crew is set to make history. For more, we go to CNN's Gina London, who's at the launch site. Good morning, Gina.
Hi, greetings to you, Bettina. That's right. In about 15 or so minutes from now, here at Kennedy Space Center, Florida, if we can go to a live shot, we can see the Space Shuttle Columbia. 5 members will be on board, and one of them is who's going to be making history today. Her name's Eileen Collins. She'll be the first female to command a shuttle. 42-year-old Air Force Colonel Eileen Collins is fulfilling a lifelong dream by commanding Columbia. But being the first woman to do so doesn't really faze her.
I'm honored to be the first woman to have the opportunity to command a shuttle. I don't really think about that on a day-to-day basis because I really don't need to.
As commander, Collins will be responsible for her 4 crew members, 1 woman and 3 men, during their 5-day mission.
If we can achieve these dreams, then a lot of the folks out there can achieve their dreams also, and especially the young girls.
And Collins will also be responsible for one of the largest and most expensive payloads ever, the $1.5 billion Chandra Observatory. The Chandra telescope is expected to fly 200 times higher than the Hubble, and its X-ray vision will zero in on the dark side of space, unseen matter like emissions from exploding stars and black holes.
The Chandra X-ray Observatory will open our eyes to these objects with the clarity of the Hubble Space Telescope, and in addition will allow us to view the fascinating invisible side of the universe.
And the NASA scientists here tell us that about 90% of the universe is classified as what they describe invisible or dark matter. It's interesting, too, as we wait for the shuttle launch, to be aware that Eileen Collins, the U.S. Air Force colonel who's commanding this, it's fitting that she's the first female to command it. She was also, in 1995, the first female to pilot a shuttle. Reporting live at Kennedy Space Center, Florida, I'm Gina London. Back to you, Bettina.
And Gina, of course, with this special occasion and a woman as the commander of the shuttle, any special guests there to mark this occasion?
Yes, indeed, there is. The First Lady herself of the United States, Hillary Rodham Clinton, is going to be watching, and being flanked by her are the members of the United States, victorious members of the U.S. national soccer team.
I guess you could call that lots of woman power there. Thank you very much for that, Gina London. And of course, CNN will bring you the launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia live in just a few moments. Our special coverage begins at the bottom of the hour. That's right after this edition of CNN This Morning. Well, this latest shuttle flight coincides with the anniversary of another space mission and one of the great moments of the 20th century. 30 years ago, on July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon with the immortal words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." All three of the Apollo 11 astronauts, that's Armstrong, plus Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins, are said to be honored today with an award from Vice President Al Gore.
Die USA auf den letzten Kilometern zur Allmacht. Neil Armstrong und Edwin Aldrin in der Landefähre Eagle nur wenige Kilometer über dem Mond und dann endlich am Ziel ihrer Träume. Es ist ein kleiner Schritt für einen Menschen, aber ein Riesenschritt für die Menschheit. Mit diesen Worten erobert Neil Armstrong den Mond. Nach der Landung war ich doch ein wenig überrascht, wie schnell wir es geschafft hatten. Erst da habe ich mir gedacht, dass ich eigentlich etwas sagen müsste. Amerika ist wieder wer und schaut trotzdem kaum noch hin, als weitere Astronauten über den Mond hopsen oder im Buggy darüber hinwegrumpeln. Alltag im Weltraum. Erst 1975 merkt die Welt wieder auf. Eine Apollo und eine Sojus friedlich vereint in der Schwerelosigkeit. Wenigstens im All sind US-Amerikaner und Sowjets Verbündete. Dann aber der Schock. Die hochfliegenden Träume der USA zerplatzen, als 1986 die Raumfähre Challenger kurz nach dem Start über Cape Canaveral explodiert. 6 Astronauten und die erste Zivilistin in einer Raumfähre sterben. Erst 2 Jahre später starten die USA den nächsten bemannten Raumflug. Und heute, knapp 11 Jahre danach, bauen sie zusammen mit anderen Ländern die internationale Raumstation ISS. Im Jahr 2004 sollen die ersten Menschen dort einziehen. 35 Jahre nach der Zwischenstation auf dem Mond.
The following is CNN's coverage of a live event.
Hello, I'm Miles O'Brien at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We welcome all of our international viewers to a historic moment in the history of space exploration. A female at the controls as commander of a space shuttle, Colonel Eileen Collins of the U.S. Air Force, is seated and strapped in the Space Shuttle Columbia. We are now about 5 minutes and 30 seconds to launch. Eileen Collins, at age 42, from Elmira, New York, is a veteran test pilot, an Air Force veteran who has flown twice before as co-pilot on the space shuttle. She was strapped in a little bit earlier, along with 4 other members of her crew, her pilot, Jeff Ashby, Catherine Katie Coleman along with her as well, Steve Hawley, an astronomer who is going to be involved in this mission, which includes the deployment of an X-ray observatory, a $1.5 billion Chandra observatory. In addition, Michael Tonini of the French Air Force and the French Space Agency is also on board. They will be launching within about 4 minutes and 49 seconds. The countdown has gone very smoothly. The weather looks good so far, and they will get into space and get to work immediately to deploy that satellite. It's the heaviest payload ever brought into orbit by a space shuttle. Space Shuttle Columbia, the old gray lady of the shuttle fleet, this will be its 26th mission. This is the 95th shuttle mission and the first with a female commander. And joining me live here at the Kennedy Space Center for some insights into what is going on inside the orbiter right now is Michael Lopez Alegria, NASA astronaut who is in training right now for an International Space Station mission, February of 2000. Michael, just take us on board right now with 4 minutes to go. What are they doing?
Well, they've just started the 3 auxiliary power units. As you know, these are basically rocket motors that are used to turn hydraulic pumps. That hydraulic fluid will be used to gimbal the main engines as well as for the flight control surfaces. It's kind of a big milestone. In fact, you can see now the main engine bells will start to move in pitch and in yaw, and that is sort of a checkout. You can actually feel that on board. It's quite noticeable.
And at this point, what's going through a crew member's mind? Just the checklist and staying close to the mission plan?
Yeah, I think at this point, it's you're pretty focused on what your responsibilities are. I think if you had time, you'd probably be pretty nervous, but you really don't.
No time to be nervous.
No time.
We want to inform our viewers we'll be trying something new this evening as we launch Columbia on this historic mission. On this, the 30th anniversary, incidentally, of the Apollo 11 footsteps taken by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. We'll be providing you with some real-time information from the shuttle. You see that in the lower third of your screen. This will give you information on the velocity of the shuttle, the altitude, and its roll, yaw, pitch, which basically indicates which way it is turning at any given moment. This information will be about 6 seconds behind the actual event, but we'll give you a good idea of where the shuttle is as it continues its 8.5-minute ride into orbit. And that is some ride, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah, I think when the viewers see the velocity and the altitude in the lower left-hand corner, it's going to be pretty much of an eye-opener. This vehicle gets off the pad, it's going 100 miles an hour by the time it clears the launch tower, and it's nothing but acceleration for the next 8.5 minutes. It's quite a ride.
Comparing things to 30 years ago with the Saturn V rocket, which was a bigger rocket with more thrust, but the shuttle gets off the pad a lot quicker, doesn't it?
Right. I think it does get off quicker, plus it's not quite as big a vehicle, so the effect is that it looks like it goes even faster.
It's quite a kick, isn't it?
Right. Exactly.
All right, we're at 2 minutes and 14 seconds right now. About what's going on right now?
Right now, they're probably been given the command to close and lock their visors and initiate O2 flow. And what that means is they'll put their masks down and they'll start sounding to themselves like Darth Vader. Not a whole lot of chatter at this point. The orbiter test conductor is giving them sort of a Godspeed John Glenn kind of message. And from here, you're very concentrated on what's going on. The next big milestone will occur in about 31 seconds, and that's when the computers on board the shuttle take over the launch from the ground-based computers. And that's a real milestone. If that works well, then they'll just be ready to go.
I think we just heard a few words from Eileen Collins as she was addressing the Launch Control Center, just offering her thanks to for their efforts for such a smooth countdown. A lot of work goes into this. Some 14,000 people work here in all, hundreds working directly on this, and they get a lot of credit. Or they should get more credit.
This is a real team effort. I mean, those are the 5 people who kind of get the spotlight, but there are literally thousands and thousands of people, not only here at Kennedy Space Center, but at NASA centers all over, at the various contractor sites, and you know, really each and every person is critical to the path, and so they all should be acknowledged.
All right, we're inside 1 minute right now. Take us on board once again. What's going on now?
Everything is okay. As I said, they're looking for that big 31 seconds. That's a major transition point. The pilot, Jeff Ashby, will have called up different screens on his CRTs to monitor the health of the various systems. And inside 31 seconds, at about 10, we'll hear you have a go for main engine start. That is commanded by the ground. The main engine start the
and we have a go for auto sequence start. Columbia's onboard computers have primary control of all.
So the onboard computers now have control, right. And that's a critical moment. There have been aborts at that period of time before, haven't there?
Basically, the shuttle does a quick health check of itself. Doesn't really believe the ground necessarily. It says, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I'm doing it. Here come the main engines.
8. Let's listen, Eddie. Let's listen.
Cutoff is given. NTD to CCD. We have hydrogen in the aft at 640 ppm. Copy. And C-prop NTD.
We have a cutoff of our sequence.
Decreasing now.
Yeah, it sounded like they had an elevated concentration of hydrogen in the aft compartment around the engines. Look before any of the engines started, although it's hard to tell from here. And what that means is that a very automatic set of procedures has been started, and they will now work on getting the crew out.
All right. Now, how critical is this period of time right now? You've got a fully fueled vehicle, 500,000 gallons of super chilled fuel on board there. Is this a critical time right now?
Well, it is critical. There's no doubt about it. We do practice this in our terminal countdown demonstration test, so the crew is well aware of what's going on. But, you know, the prudent thing is to get everybody out in a controlled but timely fashion. And it takes a long time. You can't just sort of hop out of your seat.
Now, this has happened before in the shuttle program, hasn't it?
It's happened several times. I don't know exactly, but, you know, more than a few.
All right, and to explain it properly, there's a hydrogen buildup at the base where those main engines are, and there are essentially sparklers there to alleviate that, right?
That's right. And the reason that they would cut off something like that is that it is indicative of a possible leak of hydrogen, and obviously you don't want that. You remember that in the early 90s, the shuttle program was plagued by these types of hydrogen leaks, and they chased them for a long time before they were able to find them, and you know, have no idea whether this is similar to that, but they just don't want to take any chances.
And that points out why it's so critical, the sequence of events in a launch. Those main engines have to be up and running properly, at least to 90%, no hydrogen leaks before they ever light those solid rocket motors, because once those are lit, you're going for a ride, right?
Right, exactly. The solid rocket motors, once you start them, you can't turn them off. The main engines, on the other hand, you can. So they want to make sure the three main engines are, as you said, working properly up at 100%. Once they're sure, and that takes about 6 seconds for that whole sequence, then they give the go to launch the boosters. In this case, that didn't happen, so we have the cutoff.
All right. Now, when they say they're safing the vehicle, what exactly does that mean?
Well, I think it means that basically there are certain pyrotechnics that are...
Hang on, let's listen to George Dillon.
The aft engine compartment, we had a redundant launch sequencer hold called that stopped the countdown and prevented the main engines from firing.
OTC PLT, APU shutdown is complete.
Copy that, NTD.
And NTD copies.
CDR, reconfigure heaters.
Now, this is the kind of thing you would practice in a simulation.
That can work.
Practice it in sims, and as I said, we actually practice it here at the Cape about 3 weeks prior to launch. So the crew's very familiar with what's going on. There are procedures in the checklist. They just turn to that page and they go right down the list, waiting for, you know, calls from the orbiter test conductor, who's kind of quarterbacking the show right now.
It's got to be a disappointing moment for the crew, or at this time, is it just a checklist kind of thing?
I've never been in that situation, but I am sure that they know that it's disappointing, even though they're concentrating on what their job is right now. I'm sure they're, you know, it's kind of a harumph right now, and but I think they, you know, they realize they need to get the vehicle safe, and they'll cry over the spilt milk later.
Of course, we all know that mission specialist Steve Hawley back in 1986 was aboard Columbia on what turned out to be one of the biggest series of delays in the shuttle program, at least 5 or 6 separate delays over a 2 or 3 week period. This has got to be particularly vexing for him.
It's an interesting comment because Katie Coleman and I flew together on our only mission, and we had 6 scrubs before we launched too, so one of those two is jinxed, and I'm not sure which yet.
You don't want to have them on your crew, I guess.
That's right.
How long does it take before we'll see the crew coming out of that hatch?
It'll take close to an hour, I would guess. It sort of depends on how fast they step through the checklist, but there's a lot to do and a lot of things, and you know, I don't think they're in any danger. They're not on fire or anything like that, so it'll be a fairly controlled egress.
And basically what we're talking about is a 24-hour recycle. They'll try again tomorrow.
I am not sure. In general, when you have a cutoff like that after the go for main engine start, it's more like weeks or months.
Oh, really?
It all depends whether they have to change an engine, and without knowing more of the technical details, I can't tell you whether they need to do that.
Given the fact that you had a hydrogen leak, one of the engines may be suspect, and therefore this could be a more serious delay.
That's right. If any of the engines went significantly into their start sequence, they will probably have to change the engine. Again, I'm not willing to go on perfect record as saying that at this point, because I don't know what happened, but that would not surprise me at all.
And given the constraints of the range here, with some closures expected, and given the constraints of other missions which are coming on, that puts this mission in the possibility of being seriously delayed.
There will be a lot of head scratching going on in the next few days, because you're right, there are a lot of considerations. They want to get this vehicle to scheduled maintenance. The range conflicts are an issue, so we'll have to see how it shakes out.
All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll come back and we'll keep you all informed as to what's going on board the Space Shuttle Columbia as they contend with a pad aboard. It's a rare occasion. It has occurred in the past in the shuttle program. Everybody's safe on board the shuttle. There's nothing to be concerned about, but nevertheless, they're making that orbiter safe before the crew steps out and returns to their quarters, indicating perhaps a significant delay for this historic mission of Eileen Collins and her crew to deliver that X-ray satellite into orbit. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Back now with live coverage of what was to be an historic launch tonight of the Space Shuttle Columbia with the shuttle commander Eileen Collins, Colonel of the U.S. Air Force, an unprecedented situation with a woman aboard in the commander's seat of a space shuttle. Unfortunately, Eileen Collins did not get an opportunity to make history on this evening here at the Kennedy Space Center. About this time right now, she should have been well on her way into orbit, Instead, a few moments ago, this was the scene.
T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 12. 10, 9, 8, 7.
Cutoff is given. STD to CCD. But it's we have hydrogen in the aft at 640 ppm. I copy. And C-prop NTD.
We have a cutoff of our sequence.
Joining me live here, Michael Lopez Alegria, NASA astronaut. Michael, to a layperson's eyes, it didn't look like those main engines fired. It looked like they noticed the hydrogen leak before they actually fired. Is that true? Do we know yet?
That's what it looked like to my eyes, too. I did see what looked like some kind of purging out of the center engine, but, you know, from where we sit, it's hard to guess what happened.
And just to help people understand, those things that look like sparklers, what are those for there?
Yeah, those things are basically, as you pointed out, to burn off any excess gas that may be escaping. It's got nothing to do with lighting. They're not igniters or anything like that. They're just there to burn off any trace gases that come out.
Obviously, a lot of sensors down there. Somebody detected a little more hydrogen that should be there and said, cut it off.
Right, and some of the comm that I was hearing when we were on the break sounded like it was a minor exceedance of the hydrogen concentration, but again, it's hard to say from this
So
point.
the jury's still out as to how long this might be delayed. Let's just to underscore the point here that the crew is entirely and utterly safe right now.
Right, the crew is safe. They're in the process of safe in the vehicle. The closeout crew will be coming out to help them get unstrapped and take them through a normal egress, not an emergency egress. So that's the important thing, is they're safe. You know, no use to speculate about what they're going to do tomorrow or the next day. We just want to get them out back to crew quarters, and we'll take it from there.
And just once again, a terribly disappointing thing, I'm sure, for everybody who's they've worked 15 months for this moment.
It's very tough. I've been through a few scrubs myself, none this far into the count, but they're never easy.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll close it at that. Michael Lopez Alegria. We will be watching it, of course, all throughout the evening as the crew disembarks from the Space Shuttle Columbia after this aborted launch attempt. And we will bring you the information on exactly when they might try to attempt another launch of Space Shuttle Columbia as soon as we get it to you. Stay with CNN all throughout the night for continuing coverage of the mission of Space Shuttle Columbia and Colonel Eileen Collins. I'm Miles O'Brien reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center.
This has been a CNN Live event.
Was aborted with just 6 seconds to go after high levels of hydrogen gas were detected in the engine compartment. The shuttle was due to take off some 2.5 hours ago from Cape Canaveral in Florida. It was scheduled to coincide with the 30th anniversary of the first landing on the moon.
Sekunden vor Ablauf des Countdowns ist der Start der US-Raumfähre Columbia abgebrochen worden. Die NASA teilte mit, im Triebwerksbereich sei eine hohe Konzentration von Wasserstoff festgestellt worden. Es werde geprüft, ob innerhalb der nächsten 24 Stunden ein Start möglich sei. Die Raumfähre, die erstmals unter dem Kommando einer Frau steht, sollte einen Satelliten zur Sternenbeobachtung aussetzen.
Now to our earlier story, and NASA has called off the launch of Space Shuttle Columbia. The launch was aborted after high levels of hydrogen gas were detected in the engine compartment. For an update now, we're joined from Cape Canaveral by Gina London. And I'm sorry, I'm being told we don't have Gina London, but we'll return to that story a little later. No, Gina is there now. Let's cross to her. Gina, what details do you have for us?
Hi, what we have for you right now is that you may have already mentioned, I think I overheard you, that yes, that is what the mission control people here at NASA are saying, that there were, in just a few 6 seconds even before the 3 main engines of Space Shuttle Columbia were set to fire, there were the detection of about high levels of hydrogen in the aft engine compartment. We don't believe from the officials that there was any kind of fire, any necessary danger at the moment before the detection to the crew members, and that they have all been safely contained, and they are going to be removed from the shuttle in about 30 minutes. The officials have not decided, however, when the relaunch, the scheduled relaunch of this Space Shuttle Columbia, which of course was to be a historic mission, will take place. It may happen either tomorrow, Tuesday here in Florida, or perhaps as late as Wednesday. But what we do know right now is just seconds before this shuttle was to lift off, the countdown was going, there was a detection of a high level of hydrogen in the aft engine compartment, and that is what brought everything to a standstill right now. In just a few moments from now, the members of the crew, including U.S. Air Force Colonel Eileen Collins, the commander of this, the historic first female commander, will be taken off of the shuttle.
So, Gina, are NASA authorities saying just how serious this problem is?
Not so far. We understand that the NASA engineers are coming to take a look to find out what may have caused this, why perhaps it wasn't detected until the very last seconds, and then of course we expect later on as the investigation continues to find out what precisely this may have developed into had it not been scrubbed at such the last second. But what we can report right now is that all 5 members of the astronaut team, the crew members of the Space Shuttle Columbia, are safe, and they are expected to be removed safely then from the Columbia aircraft in just a matter of seconds. There's a lot of emergency vehicles that have been coming out to the launch pad, and we expect to be seeing them probably by camera then in probably about 30 minutes from now as they are removed.
Gina London in Cape Canaveral, thanks very much for that update. Back now to Bettina in Berlin. And the 4 other astronauts were safe, but they rushed to turn off all shuttle systems after high levels of hydrogen gas were detected in the engine department. Columbia was to have blasted off 2.5 hours ago, carrying the world's most powerful X-ray telescope. NASA officials are hoping to relaunch Columbia soon.
Now that we are convinced that this is not a real leak and we have no serious concern with launch, we're going to get into a 48-hour scrub turnaround. And the reason for 48 hours is we did start the external igniters that burn free hydrogen outside of the main engine nozzles, and we have to replace those. And to do that, we have to get access through the engine service platforms. That work will require us to work through much of tomorrow and later the next day.
And CNN plans to bring you live coverage of that launch when it happens.
7 astronauts who traveled to the moon for that historic mission. Neil Armstrong, who took the first steps on the moon, Edwin Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins each received the Langley Gold Medal for Aviation. But NASA was hoping for another milestone this Tuesday. The first woman Space Shuttle commander and her crew were ready for liftoff, but things didn't exactly go as planned. CNN's Miles O'Brien has this report.
With 7 seconds left on the countdown clock, NASA's attempt to make and mark history ended with a fizzle.
Hydrogen in the air.
Sensors beneath Columbia's 3 main engines detected higher than acceptable levels of hydrogen gas. Left unchecked, a hydrogen leak could cause an explosion.
What you don't want to do is take off with that thing and it's a leak and it becomes a bigger leak and you've got a real problem in the aft end of the orbiter, and I mean that's just a very dangerous place for anything to be going wrong.
Mission managers determined it was a bad sensor reading, not an actual leak, but it will still take 48 hours to prepare Columbia for launch once again.
And the reason for 48 hours is we did start the external igniters that burn free hydrogen outside of the main engine nozzles, and we have to replace those.
NASA's first woman shuttle commander, Air Force Colonel Eileen Collins, is leading Columbia's mission to deploy the $1.5 billion Chandra X-ray telescope. First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton brought 20 members of the U.S. women's soccer team to witness the launch. They were joined by the first American woman to fly in space, Sally Ride, and singer Judy Collins, among others. It was all supposed to happen on the 30th anniversary of NASA's finest moment, man's first footsteps on the moon. Space shuttle launches have been aborted seconds before liftoff 5 times before, each time causing long delays. But in this case, the shuttle's main engines did not start, so they won't have to be replaced, making it much easier for NASA to make Columbia ready again. Miles O'Brien, CNN at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
President John F. Kennedy's dream would be realized. A fountain of fire propelled men to the moon, and a change in attitudes would eventually let women join in space. But on the anniversary of the moonwalk, space programs around the world face questions over purpose and relevancy. Hello, welcome to Q&A. I'm Michael Holmes, still filling in for the vacationing Riz Khan. Well, 30 years ago, the space race was a competition between global superpowers mired in a Cold War. Now, international cooperation is the hallmark of long-range planning to conquer the heavens. But has popular interest in space exploration waned, and what will it take to revive the excitement of 30 years ago, generated by that one small step? Well, a little later in the show, we'll be joined by a pioneer to get women involved in space. We'll also talk to the author of a book, A Man on the Moon, an acclaimed book that led to a mini-series. But first, we're joined by CNN's correspondent, Miles O'Brien. He's covering the anniversary of the moonwalk from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Now, remember, Q&A is an interactive program. Email us or fax us with your questions and comments. You can also take part in our internet chat room. Log on via the internet website. It's at cnn.com/Q&A. Let's talk now with our space correspondent, Miles O'Brien. Miles, apart from a shuttle takeoff, what's planned to mark this occasion?
Well, Michael, there's a lot of things going on right now in Washington, as a matter of fact. The 3 members of that Apollo 11 crew are being feted all throughout the city at the Smithsonian Institution, the Air and Space Museum. They were participating in a special interactive type of program with some students at a museum in Arlington, Virginia, just across the river from Washington, a place called the Newseum. A rare appearance seeing all 3 members of the crew together. As you well know, Neil Armstrong, the commander of that mission, a pretty reclusive person. Michael Collins, the command module pilot as well, fairly reclusive. To have them all together in one place talking about the good old days is kind of a rare thing. So that's where most of the attention on the Apollo anniversary shifts today. Here at the Cape, they're very busy just trying to get the Space Shuttle Columbia ready for another try at a launch, which will be on the early morning hours local time on July 22nd now.
Miles, when John Glenn went back into space for the second time, it was hoped that in part that would revitalize public interest. The cynics say that was the only reason. Did that happen?
Well, I think it was a short-lived kind of thing, and I'm sure that the cynics had a lot of credence behind what they said, because the fact of the matter is, although NASA tried to sell the John Glenn mission as a science mission, as an opportunity for NASA to look at how the aging process and space travel are connected in one way or another and how each affects the other, the bottom line is that John Glenn's mission was much more about public relations for NASA. NASA has not scheduled any additional senior citizens to fly in space, and just to fly one senior and try to draw any sort of scientific conclusions is impossible. No scientist would tell you they could come to any conclusion based on the John Glenn mission one way or another. The bottom line that scientists tell us right now is that John Glenn responded to space just like any other average astronaut would. Now, what does that tell you? Not a lot about anything to do with seniors and space travel whatsoever. So it was a public relations bonanza. Why it didn't last longer, I think, bespeaks of the nature of the shuttle program. In the days when John Glenn was flying, when Apollo 11 was flying, there were clear goals. It was in the atmosphere of the Cold War. There was a geopolitical competition underway, and we were headed for a very specific destination, the moon race. As it stands right now, the space shuttles and the space station, which is being built, goes around and around in circles, and it's very difficult to sell that kind of adventure to the public.
Miles, let's go to our version of high-tech now, our internet chat room, which is, as always, extremely active. The question is NASA planning another mission to the moon?
There are no current plans to send any missions to the moon, no official formal plans. There are people who work at NASA who sort of keep I guess you'd call them a back burner plan to consider possibilities for going to the moon, establishing a colony, sort of living off the land, if you will, on the lunar surface. But these are nothing in the way of official sanctioned projects. As it stands right now, no one in Congress or the American public has given NASA a mandate to return to the moon, and it is NASA's belief that without that mandate, it is impossible to stage such an effort.
Well, let's say with that thought for just a moment, an email we received overnight from Germany asks a question that you just touched on a little bit there. Are there any plans for a moon colony? Now, when you say that there's not much actively in place in terms of plans for a return to the moon, what are there thoughts about such things?
Well, there are a lot of fanciful thoughts about it. There are some compelling reasons, scientists would tell you, to go to the moon. Imagine the astronomical observatory that you could put on the moon. You would have an incredible vantage point to view the solar system deep into the reaches of the solar system, much further out than the Hubble Space Telescope is at 250,000 miles. The Hubble Space Telescope at about 250 miles above the surface. A big difference, a much better vantage point. You could set up solar arrays and collect solar power and microwave that power back to Earth if the Earth was in dire need of energy. This would be something that would give you a tremendous opportunity to gather a lot of power. And there's something that's been said time and again in science fiction. A new book is out by Homer Hickam entitled Back to the Moon, in which a shuttle is actually hijacked to the moon for the purpose of getting helium-3. Helium-3 is a substance which appears very rarely on Earth, but is plentiful on the moon. Helium-3 would allow fusion reactions to occur, nuclear fusion reactions. And if there ever were an energy crisis on this planet, nuclear fusion, which is much more efficient, it doesn't create waste like fission does, helium-3 would be something that might be worth a journey to the moon. The bottom line is there needs to be a commercial reason to go. Some would suggest the reason might be tourism.
And that is a fascinating topic. We're going to come back and talk more with Miles about this. We have to have a short break now. First, though, a note for you. CNN Interactive has set up a special website dedicated to space exploration, past, present, and future. There's a look at it. The pages look at how the US space agency NASA has developed over the past 40 years. Find out about the scientific advancements made through the moon explorations and download the sound of history, including Neil Armstrong's famous "one small step" remarks. You can also leave your own comments about what you think should be the next target for space exploration. Log on to the World Wide Web, cnn.com/Apollo, and we'll be back with a whole lot more in just a moment.
Commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
The 30th anniversary of Apollo 11.
Welcome back to Q&A. On this edition, we're marking the 30th anniversary of the moonwalk with a look at space exploration, past, present, and future. Joining us from our Washington bureau is Andrew Chaikin. He's a contributing editor for the magazine Popular Science and has authored numerous articles for Discover, World Book Encyclopedia, and other publications. Mr. Chaikin's acclaimed work, A Man on the Moon, was the basis for an award-winning television miniseries with Tom Hanks. And with Miles O'Brien at the Kennedy Space Center is Jerry Cobb. Ms. Cobb became NASA's first female astronaut candidate in 1960, ranking in the top 2% of all people tested for astronaut training. She never made it into space, still wants to, but she did start bringing medicine and other supplies to missionary in the South American rainforest. That was work for which she was nominated for a Nobel Prize. Let's go to Andrew Chaikin to start with on this segment. Andrew, what did we learn from those moon shots, and were they worth it?
Well, we learned nothing less than some of the major secrets of how the Earth and the solar system came to be. The moon is really the Rosetta Stone for all of that exploration that we've done. It is like a cosmic museum that contains all that early history. That's the scientific side of it. We also learned, you know, as a spacefaring species, we learned how to go from our home planet to another world. And that is nothing less than an evolutionary milestone for the human species. Now, what did we get out of it? Well, we got, as I say, scientific knowledge. We got amazing new technologies that have influenced almost every part of our lives with computer technology and that sort of thing. And I believe that we got an enormous spiritual uplift from seeing our planet as it really is, from the distance of the moon. And the astronauts saw it as a beautiful, distant and precious world. It had a kind of a fragility about it. And that, I think, has transformed our view of the universe in the second half of the 20th century.
Andrew, if there was so much value in it, our chat room's been asking these questions since we've been on air. Why haven't we gone back?
Very simple. It comes down to money. NASA's budget started to decline even before the first moon landing. And by 1969, the political reality had changed. No longer was space exploration a major priority. We had a war in Vietnam going on that was tearing the country apart. We had concerns like inflation, the environment, civil rights. And so all of those things combined put NASA out of the top billing in Washington. Given those budgetary realities, NASA was forced to choose between going back to the moon and going ahead with a reusable space shuttle, which they felt was very important. So it's really a matter of money. It's going to come down to either new technologies that will allow us to get into space more cheaply, or, as Miles was talking about before, some sort of equivalent of the gold rush that we had in this country in the United States in the 19th century, only a space-age version of that, maybe to get energy from the moon, maybe for space tourism, maybe something else. But that economic equation has got to change.
I'd like to touch on space tourism with you in a moment, but first let's go back to the Kennedy Space Center. And with Miles O'Brien down there is Jerry Cobb, who is a true pioneer of women in the space industry, if you like. Ms. Cobb, thanks so much for being with us. Now, in the 60s, the Soviets beat the US in just about everything except actually landing on the moon. What was the feeling among astronauts at that time? Was it discouragement, or did it just make you more determined to succeed as a team?
I think a little bit of both. It certainly added to our incentive to do everything we could, because we were behind the Russians at the time. Actually, the only first in space we could have had would be the first woman in space, but we weren't ready to send a woman into space, even though we had women who were ready to go.
Do you regret not having actually made it into space, or do you see your contribution as being the valuable thing that it was as part of the process for other women to make it into space? I know that you still want to go.
I certainly do. I've been waiting 40 years and working for it, and I want to go more than anything else. I think that's what I was born to do, and I will continue to work and wait and do everything I can to fly in space.
You're younger than John Glenn. We've got a caller on the line who's got a question for Andrew. Let's go to you, Andrew. The caller, I think, is in Germany. Go ahead.
Yes, hello. I have a question. In the last couple of years, Mars has been intensively explored over and over again. And I was just wondering, will other planets, can other planets be explored the same way as Mars has been?
Yes, very much so. In fact, the Mars missions that you're talking about were not with people. They were, of course, unmanned missions, robotic missions. And there's a very broad program of robotic missions. In fact, right now there's a very sophisticated probe called Cassini that is on its way to the planet Saturn. And in a few years from now, it will arrive. And one of the things it will do will be to release a lander that will actually touch down on the surface of Saturn's largest moon, Titan. And that is going to be a truly fascinating exploration, because Titan is hidden by layers of clouds. We don't know what it's like on the surface, but scientists believe that it may contain some of the kinds of organic molecules and chemistry that may have preceded life on the Earth.
I want to go back to Jerry Cobb now. A question for you, Jerry. We're celebrating the 30th anniversary, of course. I want to take you back 36 years when John Glenn, of course, the famous space name we've been talking about, appeared at a congressional hearing about women in space. And just let me quote here: the men go off and fight the wars and fly the airplanes and come back and help design and build and test them. The fact that women are not in this field is a fact of our social order. It may be undesirable. I'm sure Senator Glenn no longer thinks that way, but at the time, did those words hurt?
They certainly did. They hurt a lot, but that was the general feeling in the country, that the men would go into space and the women would have to wait until, as it now turns out, for more than 40 years.
We got a caller on the line, a Wegby, I think, in London, has a question for you. Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why NASA or the government of the United States is using all this money on space trip to the moon, to Mars and other parts of the space, when this money could be used in developing the Earth for human beings to live in.
It's about, the question I think, to summarise, Jerry, was about the money spent. Do you personally, as a former astronaut trainer, do you think the money's well spent?
Yes, I certainly do. Without a doubt, the money is well spent.
Okay, Jerry Cobb, thanks so much for being with us. It's been a terrific honour to have you on the program. Hopefully you will get your ticket into space if John Glenn can. Why not Jerry Cobb? Time to take a short break now, and stay with us though. We'll say goodbye to Andrew Chaikin, who is joining us there because he's got other appointments. Before we break away for a moment, let's check in with our quick vote. We're asking, given what you know about space flight, would you accept the risks involved for the chance to walk upon the moon? Stay with us. There's the results there. 74% of you say you would accept the risks to walk upon the moon. A mere 20%, or 26% rather, are a little less enthusiastic. Stay with us. We're looking at the space race. Let's go back to the Kennedy Space Center. Miles, a question for you. We all know the first man who walked on the moon, but I bet virtually none of our viewers would know the last man who walked on the moon. I bet you do. It was Gene Cernan. What's been the effect of that reduced level of public interest?
Well, you know, the last man on the moon, Gene Cernan, really bridles at that title. He's never liked it one bit. He felt that he didn't want to be a part of something that was ending. He wanted to be the part of some great beginning. Unfortunately, that was wishful thinking on his part. It should be noted that Apollo 17, his flight on which he became the last man on the moon along with geologist Harrison Schmitt, wasn't supposed to be the last Apollo mission. At least 3, 4, maybe even 5 additional Apollo missions were slated to fly. They were cut by the Nixon administration in the middle of problems paying for the Vietnam War. Inflation was a problem at the time. The lingering effects of the Great Society. Nevertheless, the budget could not be balanced, and NASA was the one that took the heat on that one. So the lingering effects, a man like Gene Cernan has walked around the country for now 27 years, bemoaning the fact that he's the last man on the moon. And I guess really what he's left with is the answer to a good trivia question.
Robert in England has a question for you, Miles. Robert, go ahead.
Good evening, Michael. Good evening, Miles. There's been a lot of talk recently about the discovery of large quantities of water by the Clementine probe. I wonder if you think that will have any influence on man's return, bearing in mind the obvious large costs of retrieving the water to produce hydrogen and oxygen, etc.
Well, I think you know the answer just by what you said. If water exists in retrievable quantities on the moon, that obviously makes it a lot easier for us to contemplate the possibility of some sort of lunar colony. Hydrogen and oxygen are essentials for life. They also happen to be the ingredients in the big orange tank behind me in the Space Shuttle Columbia. It's rocket fuel. So if you have hydrogen and oxygen anywhere in space, you not only have the ability to live, you have a ticket to ride somewhere else.
If I can turn to Jerry now. Jerry, when you look back those 30 years and the quantum leap that's happened in terms of technology, of course, did you ever dream as a group of something like the International Space Station that's being built right at the moment?
Well, yes, I certainly did. I, was at the right age and experience to have been a part of the Mercury program or the Gemini or the Apollo. I just wish that a woman's footprint was left on the moon as well as the 12 men who walked on the moon.
So back then you were dreaming of something like a space station, something as advanced as that?
I wasn't just dreaming of it. I was hoping to be a part of it. I was working very hard to be a part of it.
When you look back at those early days of women being involved in the space program, and you look now, there is a woman commanding this next shuttle mission, what goes through your mind? Has enough been done? Are you happy that we've reached at least this stage in terms of women involvement?
I am delighted that Elaine is getting to go up, especially as a commander. This is her third space flight. We're very proud of her. We're very happy for her. We just don't think that 2 women in 40 years are enough pilots to fly in space, that there are many other women pilots who are qualified, and we're still waiting for our turn.
Back to the phones now. This one's for you, Miles. I think it's Anwar in Belgium has a question for you.
Okay, thank you. My question is to Miles O'Brien. Hello, Miles.
Hello.
Did you take any interview of astronaut Neil Armstrong? If so, could you tell us what kind of experience you have got from astronaut Neil Armstrong? I mean, did he tell you that what kind of atmosphere, soil, environment on Moon, and what was exact feelings we would like to share with you or with Neil Armstrong? Thank you very much.
Well, Neil Armstrong participated just the other day on the anniversary of the launch of the Apollo 5, Saturn V, I should say, Apollo 11 mission to the moon. Participated in a news conference with Buzz Aldrin, his crewmate, Gene Cernan, the last man on the moon, and Walter Cunningham of Apollo 7. It was I can tell you there were 100 members of the media there, and all the questions were directed at Neil Armstrong. And the reason is he's very reclusive and he's a very taciturn person. He doesn't talk much. And to the extent that he revealed his personal feelings on the moon, there was not much of that, quite frankly. Neil Armstrong doesn't like to share that kind of thing with us. He's an intensely private person. As to his scientific observations, Neil Armstrong would be the first to tell you that he was not a scientist. He was one of the finest test pilots ever in the United States. He flew to 207,000 feet on an X-15 experimental aircraft before ever joining NASA, had tremendous stick and rudder time, and was one of the best test pilots of the Apollo program, and he only spent about 2.5 hours on the moon. So the science was very limited. To the extent that we know anything about what he was feeling at the time, I think we have very few glimpses into his personal side. He was asked, incidentally, if he's considering writing a memoir. He said no.
Miles, we've got a time problem here, but I do want to get this question in. We touched on it with Andrew Chaikin. It's in our internet chat room. Will space tourism come soon? Will space be an exclusive amusement for prosperous people, or will it also be affordable for people with lower incomes? Your thoughts, look into the future.
Well, I don't see lower income folks being able to afford a ticket to ride into space anytime soon, and for that matter, it may still be in the realm of the Bill Gates category right now. The bottom line is, if you wanted a ride on that space shuttle behind me there, it basically comes out to about $20,000 per pound. So you do the math. How much do you weigh? How much do your personal effects weigh? Just to get you into low Earth orbit is a very, very expensive proposition. Now, is that going to become a reality soon? Will the costs go down? I firmly believe that's the case. Of course, that has been discussed for many years. It has been discussed for many years now, and it really needs to come to the point where private entities start building more advanced rocket designs with the help of NASA. It's a tricky proposition because this technology is so new and so expensive to develop that, quite frankly, private investment needs some help from the government to get along in the early stages of development.
Indeed. Okay, Miles O'Brien, fascinating as always to talk to you. And our great thanks too go to Jerry Cobb for joining us from the Kennedy Space Center, a true figure of space history, and hopefully for the future.
Die US-Raumfähre Columbia hob wegen eines technischen Defekts doch nicht ins All ab. 6 Sekunden vor Ablauf des Countdowns wurde der Start abgebrochen. Eine Treibstoffanzeige hatte fälschlicherweise Alarm geschlagen. Enttäuscht verließen die 5 Astronauten das Shuttle. Die Besatzung sollte zum ersten Mal von einer Frau angeführt werden. Die Amerikanerin Eileen Collins ist eine von 3 Frauen, die als Kommandantinnen im All zugelassen sind. Die Columbia soll nun in 2 Tagen starten.
With a single step, NASA's Apollo astronauts brought the moon closer to all of us. In Washington today, Vice President Gore honored the men who made that first moon walk, the crew of Apollo 11. Gore awarded a special medal for flight pioneers to astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, who set first feet, so to speak, on the moon, and to Michael Collins, who piloted Apollo 11's orbiter. Later, the astronauts visited President Clinton and left him with a souvenir of their trip, a moon rock.
The Apollo program did more than change our view of the moon. It changed life on Earth, too, giving rise to products we take for granted today. But surprisingly, it's turned out to be a mixed blessing for the U.S. aerospace industry. More on that now in this Moneyline special report from Casey Wyan.
Boeing employees dressed in 60s garb to pay respect to their predecessors who made the moon landing possible 30 years ago. Companies Boeing now owns built most of Apollo 11's components. But for some, the celebration is bittersweet because the U.S. space program has sputtered since Apollo. Herbert Meyer began working for Douglas Aircraft in 1941. In the 60s, he worked on the massive Saturn V rocket that powered Apollo 11 to the moon.
It was the competition with Russia that drove us to the race for the moon. And once we had accomplished that, it's like winning a race, and the runners sit down and relax a little bit. So we relaxed, and I think we relaxed too much.
John Carlson is another Saturn veteran.
Part of it was due to the Vietnam War and probably just apathy. After a while, you've seen one or two moon landings, and it just becomes commonplace.
30 years ago, the United States took the lead in the space race by becoming the first and still the only nation to put a man on the moon. Then the U.S. spent the equivalent of $35 billion a year on space programs. Today, NASA's budget is only a little more than a third of that.
The country made a decision that it was really going to test its aerospace industry for political reasons. And the aerospace industry responded magnificently. But really, there hasn't been any occasion since in the last 30 years to take on as large a challenge.
That's not to say that Apollo hasn't been beneficial. It made launches almost routine and sowed the seeds of today's satellite-based telecommunications industry. Dozens of other products, from hospital monitoring devices to computer screens, can be traced directly to the Apollo program.
Apollo was clearly a driver for the aerospace industry. If you look at many of the things that, the discoveries that were made and the focus and the push for Apollo, which was an enormous challenge. You realize when John Kennedy announced that we were going to go to the moon before the decade was out, John Glenn had not even orbited the Earth.
But Dimish, the dean of Wall Street's aerospace analysts, says Kennedy's mandate set a precedent the aerospace industry is still trying to shake.
Some of the legacies are not that helpful because what we have is an idea that government has to be taking the lead to be present in space and to run space, and yet on Earth we see the contrary all over the place.
Apollo was pretty much a sideshow in terms of space commercialization. Some people hoped that the big rockets developed in Apollo would be used to launch big satellites. It turned out that commercial communication satellites really only needed the much smaller rockets that had been derived from intercontinental ballistic missiles, military missiles.
France's Arianespace beat the U.S. to the commercial launch market. China and Russia are also becoming formidable competitors.
Today, we have about 25 to 30% of the commercial launch market worldwide. We can do better. And the thing that we're doing with this program here is trying to put this country back on the track to where we can have our fair share of the world market in commercial launches, and that means price.
We have a go for engine start.
Because the space shuttle has turned out to be too expensive for most commercial launches, today aerospace companies are trying to find cheaper alternatives. Boeing's Sea Launch program and Lockheed Martin's Venture Star are both aimed at recapturing business the U.S. has lost.
We're trying to reduce the cost of flying to and from space by a factor of 10. And we do that with a simple system that flies to and from orbit without throwing away any parts.
Venture Star could also supply the space station, which is currently under construction and is the industry's next big challenge.
We have major pieces in orbit that they're putting together, and I think as soon as we have a human presence on International Space Station, that will begin to capture the interest of the American people again.
For some, even that accomplishment won't live up to the promise shown by the aerospace industry during Apollo.
The ultimate destiny of mankind is to go from the Earth to the planets, just like it was from going from Europe to the New World.
When I started out in this agency as a brand new employee, I worked on sending people to Mars during my career. I hope desperately that within the next 30 years we'll have people on the moon and on Mars and doing things there that we have dreamed about for the last 40 years.
Casey Wyan, CNN Financial News, Palmdale, California.
Welcome back. It's 9 minutes past 6 here in Berlin. You're watching CNN This Morning.
In the United States, the bodies of John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife, and sister-in-law have been brought to shore. To bring us the very latest, we're joined now from Cape Cod by CNN's Mark Bernheimer. Mark.
Hello, Chris. The Kennedy family is making final preparations tonight to have the remains of John Kennedy Jr. cremated so that he may be buried at sea first thing in the morning. It is an ironic ending to the latest tragedy in the Kennedy saga. The bodies of John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, and her sister Lauren Bessette came back from the sea on a Coast Guard vessel Wednesday, verifying everyone's worst fears. The bodies were pulled from in or around the wreckage of JFK Jr.'s plane, which search crews found on the ocean floor 7 miles south of Martha's Vineyard. Senator Ted Kennedy and sons Patrick and Ted Jr. were flown by helicopter to the naval ship USS Grasp to monitor the recovery effort. Once the remains were back on dry land, the local medical examiner took custody, presumably to perform autopsies. The investigation into what caused the crash now kicks into high gear. Autopsies might help, so might a careful inspection of the plane.
The major portion of the fuselage has already been recovered. The Grasp is going to remove the remainder of the wreckage in a relatively close-in area during the course of the next 2 days.
For the families, the retrieval of the bodies means that funerals and memorial services can finally be planned. Friday, the Kennedys will reportedly hold a service in New York, where John Jr. and his wife Carolyn lived. Meantime, Carolyn Bessette Kennedy and her sister Lauren Bessette will be remembered at a service in Greenwich, Connecticut on Saturday. Chris, the Coast Guard will be spending the next 24 to 48 hours combing the very same waters where the wreckage was found, trying to find whatever's left of it, but they say they've already collected most of the debris from the plane. Mark Bernheimer, CNN, reporting live from the Coast Guard Air Station at Cape Cod, Massachusetts.
The following is CNN's coverage of a live event.
Hello, I'm Miles O'Brien, reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where the countdown is at the 5-minute and 16-second mark for the Space Shuttle Columbia and what NASA hopes will be a history-making mission with the first female commander. At 5 minutes, however, the countdown clock will stop and go into a hold, and the reason is the weather situation here at the Kennedy Space Center. Things have been good all evening long until very recently, when, as you can see from this videotape shot just moments ago, there are some thunder cells which are moving into the area. Right now, the weather situation is a no-go, making it impossible for the shuttle to return to the landing strip here should there be an abort emergency. So as it stands right now, NASA will continue this 5-minute hold in the countdown, and the members of the crew will remain on board. They have a 46-minute window in which to launch this particular shuttle in order to put it in the proper orbit to deploy a $1.5 billion Chandra X-ray telescope. Let's tell you who's on board the space shuttle this time. The big news, of course, is the commander. Air Force Colonel Eileen Collins, 42 years old, the pride of Elmira, New York, who is the first female ever to command an American space mission. She is the mother of a 3-year-old daughter and married to an airline pilot, a very busy person indeed. The remainder of her crew, there are 4 others with her, include her pilot, Jeff Ashby, who is seen here in the picture. Actually, that's not the correct crew. We're going to probably take that crew away from the picture there for a moment. Jeff Ashby is her pilot, who is also on his first mission, I should say. In addition to that, we have the flight engineer, who is a veteran astronaut, Steve Hawley, who you see walking directly behind Eileen Collins in these pictures. He's a veteran astronaut, 21 years. Katie Coleman, right in your screen right there. And then Michel Tonini of the French Space Agency. Now, it's interesting that Steve Hawley happens to be on this particular mission. He's somewhat notorious within NASA ranks for being associated with launch delays. As a matter of fact, back in 1986, he was scheduled to fly on the Columbia for a mission which was delayed no less than 5 separate occasions for weather and mechanical difficulties. And as a result of all of that, there is a joke that has been running through here that the shuttle shouldn't know he's aboard. As a result, when he came to the White Room this evening, as you can see, he was wearing a brown bag, which was presented to him by the closeout crew there before he got on board. Steve Hawley, once again, proving that delays are part of his astronaut career. This particular mission, as a matter of fact, has been delayed by more than a year. There's been some difficulties with the payload, the Chandra X-ray Observatory, a $1.5 billion astronomy device, which has a $2.8 billion program associated with it. It took some time to get the payload ready. 48 hours ago, there was an attempt to launch the space shuttle. The countdown clock got down to about the 7-second mark, and a faulty sensor gave controllers some reason to believe that there was an added buildup of hydrogen in the engine compartment of the shuttle. Turns out the sensor was wrong, but nevertheless, the countdown clock was stopped, forcing a 48-hour turnaround. Let's listen to Lisa Malone of NASA as we get an update on the weather.
Weather to clear here in the Central Florida area. Heard a preliminary that it looks like at 12:40 we would have a possible clearance of weather here in the Kennedy Space Center area. We will remain in this built-in hold at the T-minus 5-minute mark and continue to evaluate
Eastern
weather
time.
conditions here.
They're looking forward to the possibility of some clearance in the weather. That would put the launch about 12 minutes behind schedule inside the launch window. No problem there. Once again, they have about 46 minutes beginning at 12:28 Eastern time to launch this shuttle in order to put it in the proper orbit in order to deploy that $1.5 billion X-ray satellite. So we will be monitoring this weather delay here at the Cape. The moment that this countdown clock begins and there's a go for launch as a result of the weather, we will come back to you and, of course, bring you that launch live. Miles O'Brien, CNN, reporting live at the Kennedy Space Center.
This has been a CNN Live event.
The shuttle was due to take off at 4:28 Greenwich Mean Time, but bad weather has meant it's had to be postponed again. It's the second attempt to get the Columbia up and away. It was originally scheduled to take off on Tuesday, but that launch was aborted with less than 7 seconds to go. The mission is being captained by Eileen Collins, the first woman ever to command a U.S. space flight.
Hello, I'm Miles O'Brien reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. There is a rumble in the night sky here, but it's not the kind of rumble that NASA had hoped to hear. They had hoped to launch the Space Shuttle Columbia by now. Instead, we are at T-minus 5 minutes and holding. And the reason, in a nutshell, is thunder. Take a look at some pictures we shot just a little while ago. Thunder and lightning cells are moving through the general area of the Space Shuttle Columbia on Launch Pad 39B. Essentially, think of a 20-mile-in-diameter circle around it, and you will get a sense of the danger area. As you take a look at this image, this satellite image, infrared, from the Space Flight Meteorology Group, which is down at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, you see that magenta band of thunderstorms headed south, headed directly in the direction of the Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral. There are very strict rules for launching into inclement weather such as this, and NASA is loath to avoid those rules. Those rules are followed very strictly. So once again, if within this 20-mile chunk of space around the space shuttle there is lightning detected within 30 minutes prior to launch, it is considered a no-go. The primary reason for this is that the space shuttle, if it ever had to abort and return to the Kennedy Space Center in an abort condition, needs certain weather constraints to be followed in order to do that safely. It would take about 40 minutes for that abort to occur, and so they have to consider and project the weather out that far in advance. Live pictures now, Launch Pad 39B, the 5-person crew strapped in and ready. A historic mission. The person in the left front seat, the commander's seat, 42-year-old Eileen Collins, the first female commander of a shuttle mission or any American space mission for that matter. She is joined by 4 other crew members who will be deploying a $1.5 billion X-ray satellite. To your left, you see Steve Hawley, the veteran astronaut. Immediately to his left is Michelle Tonini of the French Space Agency. In the middle, Katie Coleman on her second flight, and in the far right, the pilot Jeff Ashby, who is a rookie on board this flight. Their mission should last 5 days once it occurs, but so far NASA is having a hard time on this, their second opportunity to launch. 48 hours ago, the attempt was tried right down to about 7 seconds on the countdown clock. Let's listen to Lisa Malone of NASA for a moment.
In our planned launch window, although we're working an option to extend the window by about 6 minutes. Based on the last lightning strike we had in the area, according to our flight rules.
1:14 a.m. Eastern Time. However, NASA is telling us they may be able to extend that window by about 6 minutes. They have to launch this shuttle at a specific time in order to put this $1.5 billion satellite in its proper orbit. So for now, we're at 5 minutes in holding. We will stay that way for the foreseeable future. As soon as there is any change in the situation, we will come back live and, of course, bring you the launch of Columbia should it happen. Miles O'Brien, CNN, reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
NASA is hoping it may still be able to launch Columbia within the next 10 minutes or so. It's the second time in 2 days that the shuttle launch has been delayed. Liftoff on Tuesday was called off with just seconds to go because of a dangerous buildup of hydrogen in the engine compartment. And coming...
The reason, in a nutshell, the weather. There's been a series of thunderstorms passing through the area. Lightning has been detected recently as close as 8 miles to the shuttle landing facility. And the shuttle landing facility, you may ask, why would you need that? Since they're launching, that is there and needs to be weather-friendly for the shuttle because of the possibility that it might have to abort and return to the Kennedy Space Center. Looking at some satellite images now showing an infrared image of the Kennedy Space Center area, Cape Canaveral. That magenta area is a thunderstorm system which is moving southerly and is continuing through the area. Just a few moments ago, the official word came from Launch Director Ralph Rowe.
Today, we did have an extended launch window.
One on 212.
Entity, go ahead.
Trash complete on IUS go.
Okay, copy that. Entity ISL.
NTD Launch Director.
Go ahead, Launch Director.
Due to the storm that's slowly moving to our south, we need to scrub for the day.
Okay, copy that. No go today due to weather.
Student. CDR Launch Director.
CDR, go ahead.
Eileen, we gave it our best shot with the storm today, but it didn't agree with us. So our best bet is to give it another try and another day.
That was Launch Director Ralph Rowe communicating with CDR, that is NASA speak for the commander, in this case Eileen Collins, the first woman to hold that seat on a space shuttle. She replied that they will be ready whenever NASA calls upon them to conduct this mission. It's an open question right now when that might occur. There's a series of issues which are going to come up, which is going to make it difficult for NASA to launch Columbia and the 5-person crew. There you see that crew: Steve Hawley, Michelle Tonini, Katie Coleman, Eileen Collins, as well as her pilot, Jeff Ashby. Live pictures back now at the Kennedy Space Center, Launch Pad 39B. I don't know if you can see, but there is a white gantry which is attached to the crew compartment area of the space shuttle, the orbital access arm. The crew will begin unstrapping their safety restraints and their communication cords shortly, and will be walking back to the crew quarters in just a little bit. The question remains, when will this shuttle launch? Because there is an unmanned launch scheduled for Cape Canaveral coming up, which will make it impossible for the shuttle to launch at the same time. There is some talk that that might be negotiated. Things are open. It is unclear right now exactly when that might be. If that shuttle cannot launch in the near-term future, it could be a significant delay for this mission because of other missions which are coming up. There's a radar mapping mission in September and a very critical mission to repair the Hubble Space Telescope, which is scheduled for October. A lot of questions right now. The only certainty right here is that this shuttle will not be launching. The weather is the problem this evening. 48 hours ago, it was a technical glitch which caused the difficulties. A sensor erroneously detecting a hydrogen problem caused the countdown to be stopped at about the 7-second mark. Once again, NASA's attempt to write a little piece of history. The first female shuttle commander remains strapped in at the 195-foot level above the ground, Launch Pad 39B. She will not be flying into space as a commander on this night, and we will keep you posted as to when this mission might be rescheduled. Miles O'Brien, CNN, reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center.
Start der Raumfähre Columbia im Kennedy Space Center musste heute neuerlich verschoben werden, und zwar wegen eines starken Gewitters. Nächster Versuch morgen.
Eigentlich hätte der Start der Columbia mit dem 30. Jahrestag der Mondlandung zusammenfallen sollen. Doch die Raumfähre scheint vom Pech verfolgt. Ein heftiges Gewitter nahe Cape Canaveral macht einen Start heute Morgen unmöglich. 5 Minuten vor dem Abheben wurde der Countdown abgebrochen. Eileen Collins, die erste Kommandantin einer Raumfähre, und ihre 4 Kollegen mussten das Shuttle wieder verlassen. Auch die milliardenteure Fracht der Columbia hat bereits einige Pannen und Verzögerungen hinter sich. Mit dem Röntgenteleskop Chandra, das die Columbia aussetzen soll, will man künftig schwarze Löcher beobachten.
Managers say they will try again early Friday, and if that launch is cancelled, the shuttle will be grounded until mid-August. The shuttle is the first to be flown by a female commander, Colonel Eileen Collins.
Ihrem toten Bruder seinen letzten Wunsch zu erfüllen, das war alles, was Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg noch für John F. Kennedy Jr. tun konnte. Gemeinsam mit der Familie hatte sich die Schwester des toten Präsidentensohnes für eine Seebestattung entschieden. Ihr Bruder hatte das Meer immer geliebt. Im Meer waren er, seine Frau Carolyn und seine Schwägerin Lauren gestorben. Hier sollen sie auch ihre letzte Ruhe finden. Um 9 Uhr waren die Familien Kennedy und Bissett an Bord eines kleinen Bootes gegangen, das sie zur USS Briscoe bringen sollte. Das US-Verteidigungsministerium hatte eine Sondergenehmigung für die Seebestattung der 3 jungen Leute erteilt und für die Zeremonie einen Zerstörer zur Verfügung gestellt. Die Briscoe mit den Urnen an Bord fuhr in die Nähe des Absturzortes, etwa 12 Kilometer von der Küste vor Massachusetts entfernt. Dort wollten die Angehörigen dann die Asche in den Atlantik streuen. Rund um den Zerstörer gab es eine Sperrzone, in die keine anderen Boote eindringen durften. So sollte die Privatsphäre der Trauernden gewahrt werden. Die Leiche des 38-jährigen Kennedy war gestern im Cockpit seiner Piper Saratoga gefunden worden. Wenige Stunden später bargen Marinetaucher auch die seiner Frau Carolyn und seiner Schwägerin Lauren. Am Freitag und Samstag wollen sich die Familien Kennedy und Bissett in Gedenkgottesdiensten von ihren toten Angehörigen verabschieden.
Of John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn and her sister Lauren Bissett have been laid to rest. Their families cast their ashes in the sea in a simple ceremony not far from where the 3 died last Friday. CNN's Bill Delaney has more on the ceremony.
On the destroyer USS Briscoe, a burial at sea, a service just half an hour long on what would become an otherwise long day. Farewells on the ship's fantail in the presence of 17 members of the Kennedy, Bissett, and Freeman families. 4 Navy chaplains and a Jesuit family friend of the Kennedys leading a liturgy which ended when family members, steadied by sailors, remitted the ashes of John Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn Bissett, her sister Lauren, to the Atlantic. A few miles only from where their plane went down. Hundreds gathered on the cliffs near Gay Head, where John Kennedy had a home and was long a friendly, casual neighbor. From points of the compass from early in the day, Carolyn Kennedy Schlossberg from Bridgehampton, Long Island in New York. Senator Ted Kennedy from the family compound in Hyannisport. And members of the Bissett and Freeman family from Connecticut converged in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, onto a Coast Guard cutter. Taken then to the Briscoe, a warship become a place of the spirit. The ship's simple gesture of turning to come back, the only way media and other observers at a distance knew the service was over. The Briscoe then lingering a couple of hours in Woods Hole Harbor as families slowly disembarked in 1s and 2s. The simple process of boarding hours earlier became difficult in suddenly choppy seas, wind as a day that had been uniformly gray brightened. All the while, nearby, the salvage vessel Grasp continued its recovery work, bringing up wreckage of John F. Kennedy Jr.'s plane. It was Senator Ted Kennedy, once again leading his family in the rituals of loss, who requested the burial at sea, granted permission by the Department of Defense, honoring his nephew John F. Kennedy Jr.'s wishes that his remains be returned to the ocean. Bill Delaney, CNN, Hyannisport.
We live in this building, which is like a dormitory, for those 3 or 4 days, practicing our last-minute procedures and getting fully prepared to launch. We launched at night on STS-93 based on the requirements that the Chandra Observatory had for its final orbit. We stop in the White Room on the way inside the orbiter to do some last-minute equipment reconfiguration, and here you see Eileen being strapped into the commander's seat.
Will it be third time lucky for the crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia? We'll go live to the launch site in just a few minutes. It's 6 a.m. here in Berlin on Friday, the 23rd of July. This is CNN This Morning. The United States Shuttle Columbia is due to lift off in about 20 minutes from now. It's the third attempt this week. For more on that, we go now to Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where CNN's Miles O'Brien is standing by. Good morning, Miles.
Good morning, Chris. The weather looks good, and so far the countdown is running very smoothly. NASA hoping on this, the attempt to launch Columbia, that they will be able to make a little bit of history. Of course, the historic thing on this particular mission is the commander, 42-year-old Eileen Collins, a U.S. Air Force colonel, the first female to command a U.S. space shuttle mission or any. Let's take a look at some live pictures at the launch pad 39B, about 3.5 miles over my shoulder. You see the shuttle Columbia ready. The steam venting off is actually liquid oxygen venting off. It's super cold. There you see the countdown clock in the foreground indicating 16 minutes, 30 seconds to go. There is one more hold between now and the launch, which is scheduled for 12:24 local time. Now, the weather here was a problem yesterday. Thunderstorms lurked all throughout the area and continued to lurk all throughout the narrow launch window, forcing a scrub. Earlier this evening, it was hazy, hot, and humid with a beautiful sunset. And the weather folks are telling us at the U.S. Air Force and at Mission Control in Houston that so far, everything is go for a launch as it relates to the weather. The crew, as we said, led by Eileen Collins, is a 5-person crew. Their primary responsibility on this mission is to deploy the most complicated telescope ever to put into space, a $1.5 billion X-ray telescope called Chandra. They will be conducting that about 7 hours after they launch on this morning, assuming the launch goes as planned. Now, Eileen Collins, of course, a pioneer and has always been a pioneer, among the first female test pilots, among the first pilots at all in the U.S. Air Force. A few weeks ago, I asked her if she's comfortable in that role.
I don't really think about whether I'm comfortable in this role or not. What I think about when I go to work every day is what needs to be done today to make this mission work, or to make this mission better, or to make it more successful. Whether it's training my students in T-38s or flying cargo around the world in a C-141, whether it's teaching students mathematics, or if it's, flying test aircraft. I think about, what do we need to do today? What's this next objective? I don't think about, am I comfortable or not? But now that you've asked me the question, the answer is yes, because I don't have to think about it. So I must be comfortable with what I'm doing.
Well, at last word, the launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia has been delayed until 31 past the hour. Stay tuned for our live coverage of that.
This is a CNN live event.
Hello, I'm Miles O'Brien, reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We are about 6 minutes away from the scheduled launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia and a little bit of space history. The person who is commanding this mission is what is significant about this one, 42-year-old Air Force Colonel Eileen Collins, the first female commander of a U.S. space mission, leading this mission on a 5-person crew to deliver a $1.5 billion X-ray telescope into orbit. Now, 24 hours ago, this was the scene here at the Kennedy Space Center. Lightning and thunder passed through the area all throughout the launch window, forcing NASA to scrub its efforts to launch 24 hours ago. And 72 hours ago, on the first attempt to launch Columbia and its payload and its 5-person crew, This was the scene.
Cutoff is given.
A cutoff given at 7 seconds into the countdown when a sensor erroneously detected a hydrogen link in the engine compartment of the space shuttle. Turns out that sensor was bad. That problem has since been fixed, and the launch controllers here feel that the systems on the orbiter are now fully go for launch. We're going to have a special feature for you tonight, which we'd like to show you a little bit about. The United Space Alliance, which is the private contractor which runs the space shuttle operations here at the Kennedy Space Center, will be providing us real live telemetry from the shuttle. If you look in the lower third of your screen, you'll be able to follow the shuttle's velocity, its altitude, as well as its roll, yaw, and pitch. So watch for that during the launch. It'll be about a 6-second delay behind what is actually happening, but it'll give you a good idea of the kind of speed that the shuttle is dealing with as it launches off this pad 39B here at the Kennedy Space Center. We are 4 minutes away from launch right now, and just to give you an idea of what is going on right now, in just a few moments we're going to be watching as the shuttle goes through a pre-programmed test of the flight control systems.
And is initiating drain back.
That's the voice of Lisa Malone of NASA, who is sitting in the Launch Control Center.
And counting.
Just a few hundred yards from where I sit.
Final purge of the main engines is now starting. The main engine valves are being opened and being prepared for start.
She's referring to valves which carry the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen in that huge external tank, 500,000 gallons of it.
Services has started. The orbiter flight control surfaces are being moved through a pre-programmed pattern to verify they are ready for launch. And the 3 main engines will be gimbaled and positioned for launch.
When we say gimbal, you'll see those cones eventually moving around into various places to make sure they're moving freely. Once that is completed, they will be left in the position.
All systems are go for launch at this time.
You see them moving right now.
The 26th flight of the shuttle Columbia with a crew of 5.
It's the 95th flight of the Space Shuttle program, which began in 1981 with Columbia, April of 1981 to be exact. But the first with a female as commander.
3 minutes and counting.
At this juncture, the shuttle is now on its internal power. The ground power is disconnected. A significant milestone as we march toward a launch of the space shuttle.
The liquid oxygen tank is being pressurized for flight.
Another significant moment.
The gaseous oxygen vent hood retraction is now beginning.
You're looking now at a close-up at the top of the shuttle's external tank. That hood receives gases, liquid oxygen, as they vent off from that shuttle's external tank. It is there to ensure that ice does not form all over that external tank. That vent hood, as you can see there, has 2 vacuum tunnels there which suck in the oxygen as it boils off.
When memory is cleared, no unexpected errors. Copy that.
And as you see it pivot out of the way.
Advisors, initiate O2 flow. A few days delayed, but same enthusiastic launch team wishing Columbia's crew success on your mission.
1 minute.
CDR, we've got our visors and our O2. Thanks for all the great work, and we'll see you in 5 days.
Commander Eileen Collins, obviously ready to go. This mission has been delayed by almost a year now. Problems with the payload primarily. The Chandra X-ray telescope.
Columbia continuing to look very clean. 90 seconds away from launch.
Difficulties with the payload itself as well.
Of NASA's series of great observatories following the Hubble Space Telescope and the Compton Gamma Ray Observatory.
Also some problems with the booster motor, which is designed to put it in its much higher orbit than the space shuttle.
Liquid hydrogen tank being pressurized for flight.
500,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and oxygen inside that burnt orange external tank, feeding those 3 main engines, which you see on a close-up there.
1 minute and counting.
The 2 white
Columbia
solid
will be launched on an easterly trajectory on a 28.45 degrees inclination to the equator.
There's 2 white solid rocket boosters to the side there. Do most of the work getting the space shuttle into orbit. The orange tank feeding those main engines.
95th space shuttle launch. T-minus 35 seconds. T-minus 30 seconds.
25 seconds.
T-minus 20 seconds. T-minus 15. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We have a go for engine start. 0. We have booster ignition and liftoff of Columbia, reaching new heights for women in X-ray astronomy.
Now control. Houston, Columbia is in the roll. We've got a fuel cell pH number 1.
Roger, roll, Columbia. We're looking at. Columbia, Houston, we'd like AC bus sensors off. We're evaluating the fuel cell. Columbia.
That's complete, Chandra.
Roger that, Columbia. Looks like we had a transient on AC1.
Columbia is now headed downrange, altitude 3.8 miles. And as we hear, all systems okay. It looks like a sensor on board. 3 engines throttling down, all at 67%.
Columbia, Houston, we are critical to AC2 on the center engine, AC3 on the right. We've lost DCU-A on the center and DCU-B on the right.
Copy that.
And Columbia, Houston, you are go at throttle up.
Columbia, go at throttle up.
And all 3 engines are back at full throttle. Columbia is now 8 miles downrange, altitude 14 miles. The flight control team is monitoring the electrical systems on board. Again, all 3 fuel cells appear to be healthy, as do the hydraulic systems. We're approaching 1 minute 50 seconds into the flight, standing by for burnout and separation of the solid rocket boosters on the orbiter. Columbia now has burned more than 2 million pounds of fuel and weighs half of what it did at launch. SRB separation is confirmed.
You're listening to the voice of Kyle Herring at Mission Control.
Performance nominal.
Performance nominal.
That report, the performance thus far in the launch phase has been as expected. Again, the electrical systems officer here in Mission Control reports that all electrical systems are in good shape. Columbia is now 50 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 40 miles, now traveling 3,200 miles per hour.
Voice of Kyle Herring, those
approaching
numbers.
3 minutes into the flight. The next call will be shortly after 3 minutes, which will be a 2-engine call for the transatlantic abort site at Ben Guerir in Morocco. Again, all systems healthy, the hydraulic systems, electrical systems, and the 3 engines are all at full throttle. No issues that are being tracked. Again, all electrical systems are healthy aboard the orbiter.
As we listen to the voice of Kyle Herring, apparently there was some sort of indication that Eileen Collins called out shortly after liftoff, which indicated...
Columbia can reach Ben Guerir now in the event of a single engine failure. Again, all 3 are still at full throttle, and there are no issues being reported by the flight control team. All is quiet. It appears that the electrical issue earlier on appears to have been a sensor. All systems are again healthy. Columbia is 116 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 58 miles. Traveling now almost 4,500 miles per hour.
Now, those fuel cells are critical because the fuel cells are what operate the hydraulic systems on the space shuttle. The flight control systems are run by hydraulics.
Columbia, negative return.
Columbia can no longer return to the Kennedy Space Center now in the event of an engine failure, but all 3 again are doing very well.
So apparently what Eileen Collins had on the first few moments of her ride into space as commander was essentially a bit of a scare with a sensor, indicating there might have been a problem with the fuel cell, which are the power-producing devices which run the auxiliary power units on the shuttle. which run the hydraulic system.
Operator system operating normally now, 4 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight. Columbia is 199 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 67 miles, traveling 6,000 miles per hour.
And at that point, with Columbia 67 miles high and 7,000 miles an hour in all of 4 minutes and 58 seconds, let's take a look back at that launch. It was a beautiful sight indeed.
T-minus 15, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We have a go for engine start, 0. We have booster ignition and liftoff of Columbia, reaching new heights for women in X-ray astronomy.
Columbia is in the roll. We've got a fuel cell pH number 1.
Roger, roll, Columbia, we're looking at.
And there you heard the call from Eileen Collins indicating she had a problem with her fuel cell. Those fuel cells are critical. Anybody who remembers the story of Apollo 13 knows a little something about fuel cells. Essentially what they do is convert liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, create an electrical charge, create power. A byproduct of that particular reaction is water. There's some redundancy in that fuel cell system, but it is obviously a very critical system on board the space shuttle for running the hydraulics in turn running the flight surfaces which allow Columbia to fly through the atmosphere. Those hydraulics not as critical, of course, once on orbit, when they're not using those flight surfaces, those aerodynamic surfaces.
Center engine, AC3 on the right.
Watching this replay, you can't help but be struck by the acceleration and speed which is attained in such short period of time there. Already at 10 miles altitude, 52,000 feet, traveling 2,100 miles an hour.
3 engines are back at full throttle.
Throttle up is the moment when the shuttle goes through its maximum aerodynamic pressure. The throttles are reduced through that period of time. Once the shuttle gets into the higher atmosphere, where the atmosphere is thinner, the engines are boosted back up to 104% of their capacity, which takes them on their way to orbit.
Solid rocket boosters on the orbiter. Columbia now has burned more than 2 million pounds of fuel and weighs half of what it did at launch.
And the solid rocket booster separation, which of course is a very critical moment in any shuttle launch. Right now we are 7 minutes and 34 seconds into this flight. The main engines on the Space Shuttle Columbia are still firing, but they have fired successfully and fired well, and no matter what happens, even if they were to lose an engine right now, they would be able to attain an orbit. So the crew of 5 with Eileen Collins aboard, the first woman commander of a U.S. space mission, on their way to orbit right now, on their way to a page in space history. And 7 hours and 17 minutes from now, they will have done their major task, or at least begun the major part of their task, which is to deploy a $1.5 billion X-ray telescope, the most powerful X-ray telescope in the world, the Chandra X-ray telescope. It's sort of analogous to the Hubble Space Telescope. We, of course, will be watching it all throughout the night as Columbia continues its mission and as it continues toward main engine shutoff, which should come in just a few moments. Miles O'Brien, CNN, reporting live at the Kennedy Space Center.
This has been a CNN Live event.
The Space Shuttle Columbia lifts off at last with her first female commander at the helm.
It's 7 a.m. in Berlin and 6 a.m. in London. It's Friday, the 23rd of July, and you're watching CNN This Morning. Hello and welcome. I'm Chris Burns, sitting in for Bettina Lucier in Berlin.
And I'm Juanita Phillips in London. In the headlines this morning, in the United States, the Space Shuttle Columbia has successfully launched at its third attempt. Controllers at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida cancelled Wednesday's launch due to bad weather. It's the first U.S. space mission being commanded by a woman. The 5-day mission will deploy the $1.5 billion Chandra X-ray telescope to study black holes.
Erstmals hat eine Frau das Kommando an Bord, die 42 Jahre alte Eileen Collins. Am Dienstag war der Start wenige Sekunden vor dem Abheben abgebrochen worden, weil ein Messgerät fehlerhaft arbeitete. Gestern hatte wegen schlechten Wetters der Countdown gar nicht erst begonnen. Während der Mission sollen vor allem neue Erkenntnisse über Strahlungen im Universum und die sogenannte dunkle Materie gesammelt werden. Dazu dient ein etwa $1,5 Milliarden teures Röntgenteleskop, das die Crew 7 Stunden nach dem Start aussetzen soll.
Heute Morgen startete die Columbia von Cape Canaveral in Florida zu ihrer 5-tägigen Mission ins All. Es war ein Bilderbuchstart, wenn auch mit 7-minütiger Verspätung. Das Kommando an Bord hat erstmals in der Geschichte der amerikanischen Raumfahrt eine Frau. Die 42-jährige Eileen Collins erfüllt sich damit einen Kindheitstraum. Die Mission der Columbia ist der Astronomie gewidmet. Noch heute wird das Shuttle das milliardenteure Teleskop Chandra aussetzen. Chandra soll Strahlungen im Universum aufspüren und sogenannte dunkle Materie messen.
Returning now to our top story about the successful launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia. It's the first U.S. space mission being commanded by a woman. CNN space correspondent Miles O'Brien joins us now from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida with the latest. Miles, success at last.
Success at last, third time a charm. I guess that's a bit of a cliche, Juanita, but I guess it suffices in this case. We're now 32 minutes into a history-making mission. Colonel Eileen Collins of the U.S. Air Force, commander of the Space Shuttle Columbia, the first woman to hold that title in 38 years of U.S. spaceflight. The launch happened about 32 minutes ago. Let's take a look at it.
3, we have a go for engine start. 0, we have booster ignition and liftoff of Columbia, reaching new heights for women in X-ray astronomy.
Columbia is in the roll. We've got a fuel cell pH number 1.
Roger, roll, Columbia, we're looking at.
I don't know if you heard, but Shuttle Commander Eileen Collins, as she cleared the tower there, told Houston that she was having a problem with a fuel cell sensor. Well, as it turns out, it was just a sensor. No problems with the fuel cells. The fuel cells are important power-producing devices on a space shuttle. In mission control in Houston, they were able to verify that those fuel cells were operating properly. There apparently was a momentary short circuit in one of the gauges, giving her that reading. Perhaps a little bit of a scare on her first flight as commander, but nevertheless, everything worked as it should, and the space shuttle now is well into its orbit and getting right down to work. And there's a lot of work ahead here on the first day of this flight. About 7 hours from now, the 5-member crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia will be deploying a very sophisticated piece of astronomy equipment. It's a $1.5 billion X-ray telescope entitled Chandra, and Chandra is the most powerful X-ray telescope in the world. It has 1 million separate moving parts, and in a very complicated procedure, it will be deployed into an orbit which goes a third of the way to the moon, a highly elliptical orbit, and it will look deep into the cosmos, peering into black holes, supernovae, colliding galaxies, and try to tell us a little bit more about the origins of our universe. All that's going to happen on this first day, a very busy day for the crew. It's a short mission, a 5-day mission, the highlight of the mission coming on the first day. But as we said, about 34 minutes ago, a little piece of history written here at the Kennedy Space Center, Colonel Eileen Collins becoming the first woman to command a U.S. spaceflight. Juanita?
Miles O'Brien updating us there from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Now back to Chris in Berlin.
3, we have a go for engine start. 0, we have booster ignition and liftoff of Columbia, reaching new heights for women in X-ray astronomy.
Columbia is in the roll. We've got a fuel cell pH number 1.
Roger, roll, Columbia, we're looking at.
The main engine start is about 7 seconds prior to liftoff, and the main engines come up to speed and are checked out to make sure they're good before we lift off. Katie will point out the small hydrogen leak that we had on the right nozzle. 3 of about 1,000 tubes were ruptured, which were enough to cause us a little leak, but not enough to cause any sort of failure in the engine or indication that it was failing. The liftoff is quite exciting, culmination of a lot of hard work by a lot of people around NASA, and the acceleration of the shuttle is testimony to that as it clears the tower at about 100 miles an hour. Proceeding on up and passing through the speed of sound nearly vertically at about 18,000 feet, approximately 1 minute into flight. The booster separated about 2 minutes. The shuttle continues to accelerate on the main engines to about 17,500 miles an hour in 8.5 minutes. When the main engines cut off, we're in 0G. We separate the tank and we're orbiting the Earth.
About 1 hour and a half after ascent, we opened the payload bay door with Steve from inside the cockpit, and that allowed us to see Chandra outside. And after with KD, we conducted the power up of Chandra in order to have electricity and heating to the satellite.
We deployed the Chandra on day 1, and it's not just the Chandra telescope, but also the booster rocket that is attached to one end of the Chandra. You actually can't even see it behind the long silver telescope there. But in back of the telescope is the booster rocket, or the inertial upper stage. And much of our day 1 activities surround trying to check out the inertial upper stage, make sure that it is completely ready to take Chandra to its final orbit. And when some of the checks are complete, we go ahead and release the payload. And now we're going to actually tilt it up from the back of the bay. The top of the telescope is going to tilt up above the nose of the shuttle there. And this is a kind of an interesting shot where you're actually going to see the orbiter cabin reflected in the top end of the telescope. And so Jeff is actually using a camera to look out these windows, and you can see, you can't quite see Jeff filming, but you can see the 2 orbiter windows there. Now we tilt the telescope up like this so that we can go ahead and check out its lower antenna, make sure that that is functioning. It has an upper antenna as well, as we've already checked out. And we also do our final checks at that time before we release its umbilical, which is a series of cables and cords which provide power and telemetry from the telescope. And when we're sure that everyone is ready at Mission Control in Sunnyvale for the inertial upper stage, Mission Control in Cambridge for the Chandra, and also Mission Control in Houston for the shuttle, when we're sure that all those folks are ready, then I go ahead and pull the switch marked deploy. And you're looking at the deploy at the Chandra X-ray Observatory, 3rd in the series of 4 of the family of the great observatories. It's not something that moves out all that fast. It's about maybe 1 foot every 3 seconds or so. Now Eileen is getting ready to actually back the shuttle away from the Chandra, and we'll actually do a series of maneuvers to get away from the Chandra and the inertial upper stage before the inertial upper stage fires the first and then the second of its 2 solid rocket motors to then take the Chandra into its highly elliptical orbit, which is not close to the Earth as we are, but about 1/3 of the way to the Moon, so a very large elliptical orbit. This shows you as the telescope and the inertial upper stage pass by the upper windows there.
The Chandra facility was actually named after a very famous astrophysicist who worked in the 20th century and died about 4 years ago. His name was Subramanian Chandrasekhar, and that was all very hard for those of us in astronomy to say, but he was known among all of my colleagues as Chandra. And we deployed right before sunset, and this is the actual sun setting on the Chandra as we lost sight of it forever.
It certainly isn't the first U.S. space shuttle mission, but it is notable for 2 reasons. CNN's Miles O'Brien on Friday's launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia, carrying the first female commander and the largest shuttle payload ever. 8, 7, 6.
This time, Columbia provided the thunder and lightning. She blazed into orbit at 1/2 midnight.
We have booster ignition and lift
with Eileen Collins at the helm. But the first woman to command a space shuttle had her hands full right from the start.
Houston, Columbia is in the roll. We've got a fuel cell pH number 1.
5 seconds after liftoff, a mysterious short circuit caused a power outage to computers controlling critical functions in 2 of the shuttle's 3 main engines. Each engine is equipped with a backup controller, which in this case kept the engines firing as intended. It was a tense moment, although controllers downplayed it later.
Well, I don't like to speak for someone else, but if I were Eileen Collins, I imagine this mission seemed like a fairly mild simulation that she's been training for the last 2 years.
A crowd of VIPs and family members watched and cheered. Eileen Collins' husband, Pat Youngs, was there with their 3.5-year-old daughter, Bridget. Did you hear the little hiccup with the sensor as it went up? Did that scare you at all?
It didn't scare me, but just trying to pay attention to see how serious it might be. And a couple astronauts up there with us, familiar with all the technical terms, and you know, they're right there saying no big deal.
In fact, Columbia's main engines ran well, but they shut down about a second early, leaving the orbiter 7 miles lower than planned. Launch controllers say Columbia had run out of liquid oxygen, which combined with liquid hydrogen fuels the main engines. Controllers aren't sure why they fell short, but as it turns out, the high point of the orbit was good enough for deployment of the Chandra X-ray telescope. The $1.5 billion observatory was tilted, checked out, unplugged, and then released over the Pacific, 7 hours and 17 minutes after launch.
And I know that a lot of people have seen Chandra as it's been constructed and seen it as it's been installed in the shuttle, but I will tell you there is nothing as beautiful as Chandra sailing off on its way to work.
Columbia then maneuvered out of harm's way as a booster rocket sent Chandra into an elliptical orbit that will take it as far as 87,000 miles away from Earth for an unobstructed view of black holes, supernova, and colliding galaxies. Scientists hope Chandra's 5-year mission will give them new insights into the origins of the universe. Meanwhile, NASA engineers will be looking into the origins of that short circuit. So far, they say they see nothing that will shorten this historic 5-day mission. Miles O'Brien, CNN at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
Columbia installiert Superteleskop. 7 Stunden nach ihrem Start hat die Besatzung der Raumfähre das Teleskop Chandra im All ausgesetzt. Es wurde aus der Ladebucht der Columbia herauskatapultiert. Das $1,5 Milliarden teure Röntgenteleskop soll Quellen kosmischer Röntgenstrahlen und schwarze Löcher entdecken.
Im Versuch hat es endlich geklappt. Nach 2 abgebrochenen Starts ist die Columbia ins All gestartet. Damit hat eines der aufwendigsten Projekte seit Beginn der Raumfahrt begonnen. Die Columbia befördert das bisher stärkste und teuerste Röntgenteleskop Chandra in seine Umlaufbahn.
5, 4, 3. We have a go for engine start. 0. We have booster ignition and
Cape Canaveral heute Morgen 5:31 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit. Die Raumfähre Columbia startet erfolgreich ins All. Zum ersten Mal steht das Unternehmen unter dem Kommando einer Frau, der 42-jährigen Eileen Collins. Gut 7 Stunden nach dem Start bewältigte die 5-köpfige Besatzung ihre heikle Aufgabe, die Aussetzung der schwersten Shuttle-Fracht aller Zeiten. Das 6 Tonnen schwere Chandra-Observatorium, das stärkste Teleskop, das es je gegeben hat, wurde erfolgreich von der Columbia abgekoppelt. Für die nächsten 5 Jahre soll Chandra die Röntgenstrahlung im Weltall beobachten. Wissenschaftler wollen so unter anderem Informationen über die Entstehung des Universums und über die sogenannten schwarzen Löcher gewinnen. Mit Gesamtkosten in Höhe von umgerechnet rund 5 Milliarden Mark ist dies eines der teuersten Projekte in der Geschichte der Raumfahrt.
Zweimal musste der Start der US-Raumfähre Columbia verschoben werden. Am Dienstag spielte ein Messgerät verrückt. Gestern machte ein Gewitter der hochempfindlichen Weltraumtechnik einen Strich durch die Rechnung. Beim 3. Anlauf endlich hat es zwar geklappt, aber auch nach dem Start hatte die Crew mit Problemen zu kämpfen. Und all das ausgerechnet bei einer Premiere, denn zum ersten Mal hat eine Frau das Kommando an Bord. Die wichtigste Aufgabe, das Aussetzen eines Satelliten zur Erforschung der schwarzen Löcher im All, hat ihre Mannschaft bereits erfolgreich erledigt. Egal wie oft die 42-jährige Eileen Collins noch ins All reist, diesen Start mit Hindernissen wird sie wohl nicht vergessen. Andreas Langheim über Eileens heikle Mission.
Für alle, die so gern in Urlaub geflogen wären, gibt es Trost. Diese 2 Frauen und 3 Männer haben sich jahrelang auf ihren Flug gefreut. Und trotzdem wartet nichts als harte Arbeit im Orbit. Es war einer der höchst seltenen Nachtstarts am Weltraumbahnhof Cape Canaveral in Florida. Und zum ersten Mal hat im Cockpit eine Frau das Sagen. Die 42-jährige Eileen Collins. Es ist für mich eine Ehre, als erste Kommandantin zu fliegen, aber ich glaube, es ist besser, erst nach der Mission darüber nachzudenken. Collins fliegt schon lange bei der Luftwaffe und war schon als kleines Mädchen von der Fliegerei begeistert. Gut, dass die studierte Mathematikerin nur höchst kontrolliert in die Luft geht und reichlich Erfahrung hat. denn schon nach dem Start gab es reichlich Probleme. Stromabfall am Haupttriebwerk, dann Kurzschluss, dadurch bedingt Computerausfall, schon gab es kein Vollgas mehr und das bei 540.000 Kilo Sprit im Tank. Trotzdem brachte die Crew ihre 22 Tonnen Gesamtlast 250 Kilometer über der Erde in Position. Nie zuvor wurde so große Fracht ins All geschossen. Ein busgroßes Observatorium namens Chandra. Es ist das stärkste Röntgenteleskop aller Zeiten und es blickt in Galaxien, die 10 Milliarden Lichtjahre von der Erde entfernt sind. Astronomisch interessant die schwarzen Löcher. Solche verloschenen Sonnen haben ihre gesamte Masse so verdichtet, dass ihre Anziehung selbst Lichtstrahlen schluckt, weshalb sie nur von Röntgenteleskopen wie Chandra gemessen werden können. 7 Stunden nach Start dann die Erfolgsmeldung, Chandra ist ausgesetzt. Doch jetzt muss das stärkste und teuerste Röntgenteleskop seinerseits in Position gehen. Eigene Raketen wurden gezündet, damit das Gefährt seine eigene Umlaufbahn erreicht. Endlich kann die Menschheit auch den unsichtbaren Teil des Universums erforschen. Kehren wir zum Sichtbaren zurück. Schließlich ist das hier Fernsehen und reichen noch nach, was der ganze Spaß kostet. 2,8 Milliarden US-Dollar, umgerechnet sind das rund 5 Milliarden Mark. Und weil einem so viel Teures wird beschert, war uns das einen Beethoven wert.
Good evening. We begin our live coverage on NASA television of mission STS-93 here at NASA John F. Kennedy Space Center in Firing Room 1 of the Launch Control Center. Today, NASA will embark on the 95th Space Shuttle flight in the 18-year history of the shuttle program. Eileen Collins making history as the first female commander aboard the Space Shuttle. In addition, the third of NASA's great observatories will be deployed from the shuttle just 7 hours after launch. We do have the STS-93 flight crew members. Katie Coleman making her second trip aboard the shuttle today. She will be prime on deploying the Chandra X-ray Observatory. That's scheduled for 7 hours after launch today. Mission Specialist 2, Stephen Hawley, making his 5th flight today after 21 years as a NASA astronaut. Commander Eileen Collins has served as pilot of 2 previous shuttle missions, making her 3rd flight aboard the Space Shuttle today. Mission Specialist and French Space Agency astronaut Michel Tonini. And shuttle rookie pilot Jeff Ashby, making his 1st flight aboard the shuttle today, assisting Commander Collins in control of the shuttle during the flight. This is the 3rd time the crew has sat at this table getting ready for launch for STS-93. All countdown activities going on schedule to support our 3rd attempt to launch the shuttle Columbia. This is Shuttle Launch Control. We do have the flight crew in the suit-up room at the Operations and Checkout Building. Commander Eileen Collins getting suited up for the 3rd time. She just completed her weather briefing. This will be her 3rd flight. She's been an astronaut for 8 years. Her 1st flight as commander. She served as pilot for 2 previous Space Shuttle missions. And pilot Jeff Ashby making his 1st flight aboard the Space Shuttle today. He's a seasoned Navy jet pilot from Dallas, Texas, and he will lead any in-flight maintenance work that might be required during the flight and would serve as the overall coordinator for any spacewalk. Currently, there are no planned spacewalks for this flight. We have French Space Agency astronaut Michel Tonini. His 1st flight aboard the shuttle will occur today, although he has made a 2-week flight aboard the Russian Mir space station about 7 years ago. He's also in the French Air Force and has experience as a jet pilot. Mission Specialist Katie Coleman across the room. She's Mission Specialist 1, making her 2nd flight today. She, of course, has the primary responsibility for deploying the Chandra X-ray telescope. She was born in Charleston, South Carolina. She was a mission specialist on STS-73 in 1995. And Mission Specialist Steve Hawley. He's designated as the flight engineer for STS-93. He will be assisting Coleman and Tonini during the deployment of the Chandra and will be the primary operator of the small ultraviolet telescope from inside the crew module. This is Shuttle Launch Control. We do have the STS-93 astronauts departing the crew quarters. They're coming down the hallway. Crew has been here since last Friday. They've been here for almost a full week getting ready for the STS-93 launch. They've remained here at Kennedy. Flight crew now at the 195-foot level out at launch pad 39B. Members of the closeout crew assisting the astronauts with their gear and equipment. They'll be being assisted while they're out at the launch pad. In the white room, there's only room for a few members at a time, and this is a view of the orbiter access arm, which is the entryway into Columbia's crew module. Commander Eileen Collins getting ready for strap-in for the third time this week. Astronaut support personnel Rick Linehan now assisting Shuttle Commander Eileen Collins, getting into her seat there. Things very busy out now at the White Room and in the crew module of the Shuttle Columbia as we prepare for launch in less than 3 hours. The 5-point restraint harness is being connected on Commander Collins right now. Once she has all of her connections on her suit made, she will be making communications checks as she had the last 2 nights, and making checks with the test conductors here in the flying room as well as flight controllers in Houston. And aboard the Columbia's flight deck we have Jeff Ashby, the pilot, getting into his seat.
MS3N 0145.
Okay, copy. It's on step 564, please.
Copy.
And we have Mission Specialist 2, Steve Hawley, with his traditional bag on the third launch attempt, hoping that he's not the one causing the delays. He's hoping the shuttle won't recognize him. So tradition with Steve Hawley, who has been aboard several shuttle flights. This is his 5th flight, and this is not the first time he's seen shuttle delays.
Okay, flight crew, this is the OTC on Underground 2. How do you read?
CDR, loud and clear.
PLP, loud and clear. MS1, loud and clear. MS2, loud and clear.
MS3, loud and clear.
Okay, I copy you all loud and clear, and we'll be going to ICOM A.
Launch manager.
Launch director, you have the MMP concurrence to proceed with the launch.
CDR, launch director.
CDR, go ahead.
Eileen, the weather is cooperating tonight. The launch team is ready to go.
Great news, crews ready to go.
NPD, you've got my concurrence to pick up for the clock.
Okay, copy that.
Countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark.
T-minus 9 minutes and counting.
CLS auto sequence has been initiated. CLS's go for OAA retract.
A profile test of the orbiter's aero surfaces has started. The orbiter flight control surfaces are being moved through a pre-programmed pattern to verify they are ready for launch. And the three main engines will be gimbaled and positioned for launch.
ATC TLC task morning memory is cleared, no unexpected errors.
Copy that. Flight crew, close and lock your visors, initiate O2 flow. A few days delayed, but same enthusiastic launch team wishing Columbia's crew success on your mission.
ATC, CDR, we've got our visors and our O2. Thanks for all the great work, and we'll see you in 5 days.
T-minus 15, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We have a go for engine start. 0. We have booster ignition and liftoff of Columbia, reaching new heights for women in X-ray astronomy.
Houston, Columbia is in the roll. We've got a fuel cell pH number 1.
Roger roll, Columbia, we're looking at. Columbia, Houston, we'd like AC bus sensors off. We're evaluating the fuel cell. Columbia.
And that's complete, Scooter.
Roger that, Columbia. Looks like we had a transient on AC1.
Columbia is now headed downrange, altitude 3.8 miles. And as we hear, all systems okay. It looks like a sensor on board. 3 engines throttling down, all at 67%.
Columbia, Houston, we are critical to AC2 on the center engine, AC3 on the right. We've lost DCU-A on the center and DCU-B on the right.
Copy that.
And Columbia, Houston, you are go at throttle up.
Columbia, go at throttle up.
And all 3 engines are back at full throttle. Columbia is now 8 miles downrange, altitude 14 miles. The flight control team is monitoring the electrical systems on board. Again, all 3 fuel cells appear to be healthy, as do the hydraulic systems. We're approaching 1 minute 50 seconds into the flight, standing by for burnout and separation of the solid rocket boosters on the orbiter. Columbia now has burned more than 2 million pounds of fuel and weighs half of what it did at launch. SRB separation is confirmed.
Columbia, Houston, performance nominal.
Performance nominal.
That report, the performance thus far in the launch phase has been as expected. Again, the electrical systems officer here in Mission Control reports that all electrical systems are in good shape. Columbia is now 50 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 40 miles, now traveling 3,200 miles per hour.
Columbia, Houston, we have a good downlink and a great view of Chandra.
Center lines are coming open.
Roger that, Columbia.
And this view looking from inside Columbia's payload bay, the Chandra X-ray Observatory, the 45.3 foot long Chandra mounted atop its inertial upper stage, which is out of view behind the telescope. This full complement stretching almost the entire length of Columbia's payload bay.
And Houston, what you're seeing is the actual moment of deploy there when we take the switch to deploy, and it's so quiet. We were just amazed, but you look out and this thing is so big, you certainly know that it's moving towards you and over the head of the shuttle. You're getting a little bit better view of Chandra out in front of the IUS there. And I know that a lot of people have seen Chandra as it's been constructed and seen it as it's been installed in the shuttle, but I will tell you there is nothing as beautiful as Chandra sailing off on its way to work.
And Houston, what you're looking at now is just after we did the back-away burn. We fired the forward jets to burn out of plane up and around the telescope. We just had sunset, so you can't see much of the Earth behind us, but we did have a very bright, the telescope is silver and gold and blue, and was reflecting quite a bit of sunlight, but it looks like we've got a really good picture here for you as it goes off into sunset. What you see down at the bottom is the IOS, the inertial upper stage booster, connected to the bottom of the telescope in its nozzle. And of course, on the very upper part, you see the Chandra telescope, a long cone, and the bright spot on the end is the integrated science module.
And roger that. We're getting great video down here, Eileen.
Beamer, we were almost too excited to video. I tell you, it was just the most beautiful thing you have ever in your life seen. And actually, with the sun, as you're seeing, it's pretty tricky to keep it from blooming.
And Houston, what you see there in the on the back window on the left side is Michelle. Katie's on the right. And that's myself in the front. We're going through some of the procedures just prior to the deploy. The cue cards that Katie has in front of her are her deploy cue cards. They're go-no-go cue cards. They're some of the cameras that we were using were the interior electronic still camera. We have a Hasselblad that we were using for exterior photography, as well as a high-definition TV.
My father is part of the mythology of this country, and he was also a very compelling political figure, and I think certainly he was aware himself of the opportunities for politics to be both fun and serious.
There has no shooting. The President of the United States is dead.
Mrs. Kennedy took her two little children, Caroline and John Jr., to say a last farewell to their father.
I grew up most of my life in very ordinary circumstances. I went to school, I took the bus to school, I went to high school, I went to college, I played sports in college, I got a job when I went, then I went to law school.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How you feeling?
Pretty good.
Pretty good?
And I worked for the DA's office, which is a down in the trenches kind of job, and so, all the sort of theatrics really kind of played out beyond the confines of my life.
Good place. What do you have to do is wait up for
my mother passed on. She was surrounded by her friends and her family and her books, and we all feel lucky for that. And now she's in God's hands. We which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words. Ladies and gentlemen, meet George. Starting a magazine is a huge enterprise. We were 2 years in starting this, and a couple issues on down the line, my last name isn't really going to matter.
My cousin John did tie the knot yesterday.
The FAA called the tower at the Martha's Vineyard Airport and inquired about the tail number of John F. Kennedy Jr.'s airplane.
We have found debris, we have found luggage.
We were able to remove the wreckage and clear the victims.
Very much at the heart of the Catholic liturgy is the beautiful prayer for burial at sea.
And may the Kennedys and the Bessettes know that all of us are with them at this time in prayer.
I think that there's a sense of not worrying too much about things that you can't control. Just sort of living your life and doing what you feel and where your interests take you. It's complicated, and it makes for a rich and complicated life. But that's, I think, part of the puzzle to figure out in my life.